All right. Hey, everyone. Douglas here, and welcome back to the MMT Macro Trader Live stream show. Bijou is here tonight, despite his voice from on high picture not showing up. He'll be right back. He's grabbing a tea, running behind a little bit as we hit play. But anyway, how's it going, everyone? Welcome to another hopefully fun live stream. We got some fun stuff to discuss today. There's been some good Twitter drama in the MMT world that I want to get into a little bit. Also, maybe talk markets for a little while, macro, that sort of thing. We can get into that as well. Obviously, take your questions. So yeah, if you are here, make sure you say hi in the chat. Let us know that you're here, and start firing away with questions, because we're running a bit of an extemporaneous, a bit of a potpourri show. Bijou's talking in the mic. You can't hear him because I have him muted. So this is my way of letting Bijou know that I actually muted him. So I'm going to bring Bijou on in. Bijou, welcome.
Hey, man.
Welcome.
Thank you so much.
Now I got to bring your picture up in the chat because I turned your picture off.
And
there we go. There we go. Bijou has made it as well.
Thank you.
Anyway, welcome everybody. Welcome, Bijou. Yeah, another fantastic week. I don't know, fantastic or not, but what's up, Josh? How's it going?
Hey, Josh.
Bijou, how's your week, man?
Bit of a bad week, really. Boss comes back from annual leave, so everything had been relaxed a bit since then.
Nice.
Picked up some students wanting to do some study over the last week of the term break, and scholarship students. So that was a bit rushed. But it's good. I like the scholarship students. That sort of had the more interesting questions and stretches you a little bit sometimes. So that's cool. And I just come down with a cold.
Damn.
Man, I just felt it last night, and just felt, can I just sleep this off or anything? No, it sort of just came. It's going to come in. I think it's weird though, because last 2 or 3 years of COVID or whatever. Has it been 3 years now? I haven't had a cold or a flu at all the whole time.
Yeah.
So coming around my time now.
We had the exact same thing happen this past year. So we homeschool. So to begin with, we're a little bit kind of segregated from kind of the normal population. And then with COVID, and then my daughter had what you know how like when teams in sports lose, and then the next year they go on their revenge tour. They don't perform the way they wanted to, and then the following year they have their revenge tour, and they try and win the championship. That gives them the motivation. We had a revenge. The viruses had a revenge tour on the Douglas household.
No.
We went through like a year where just left and right our kids were catching up and everything.
The little Douglasine is getting sick.
Yeah.
Sucks. Well, it's all good. It's all good. Only hurts if I breathe.
Well, yeah. I mean, you don't have to breathe, right? Let's see, as people trickle in here, just to let you know, Bijou and I, we've been working on some other things. We haven't had really a chance to talk about what we were going to talk about tonight anyway, but they'll turn out to be the best. Yeah. The best episodes are the ones where we're not fully prepped. And I already see some good questions coming in.
Hang on, let me just just gotta take my anti-obnoxious medication there.
I see a good question with Josh already. Steve Keen, you've been on a Steve Keen binge. Yeah, fire any questions away. They can even hit before the third hour as well. I'm pretty well versed in Steve Keen. I'm probably even better versed in Steve Keen than I am in terms of kind of his understanding of kind of the macro landscape and the implications of what he has to say. Maybe even more so than what Warren Mosler would have to say. But we can definitely talk about that. There's been some good Twitter drama as well. Richard Murphy had a really long thread that he posted today, a blog post. Bijou, did you have a chance to read over that? I know I sent it to you right before you were going to go to bed, but
yeah, I'd started reading it, but no, I didn't read over it.
Okay.
Let me,
Yeah, pull it up
I didn't
now.
realize it had gone so long.
It was very
I
long.
think
Yeah.
I got on it early and then I didn't get back to it.
So maybe we can go over that live and just try
Yeah.
and figure out some things. Another
Yeah.
Twitter topic that I wouldn't mind getting into, and maybe this can be its own show because this guy deserves a show dedicated to him. He is a well of infinite stupidity. I feel bad for you, Bijou, having a PhD because he gives all PhDs a bad name. And I just, when they were handing out IQ points, I think he was last in line. And the problem is, if he just told me he was trolling, I'd be like, yeah, it's like you're doing a good job. But I actually think he thinks what he's saying makes sense. I'm talking about the Daniel Lacal. I think he's French, so however you pronounce his last name. But he's had quite a lot of anti-MMT. He's a Mises guy, a lot of anti-MMT stuff that maybe we can get into. And yeah, he in part, yeah, there's a few of those guys like him in particular who I don't even think they think through what it is that they actually say. So so we can do that and hit up any questions. I already see one question though, and maybe I can get my little question highlight thing up here. Will the stock market go down with the April tax strain? Tom, it could if if no one's unaware. I haven't plugged it in a while. I should say if anyone is unaware and I haven't plugged it in a while, I'll go ahead and bring it up. But we do have a Patreon. We do have a Patreon, and if you are an active trader or active investor, I do post. We have a daily dashboard that gets posted almost every day, as well as 2 updates a week that look at both kind of the long-term macro data and then some of the shorter-term data as well for kind of the swing trader, day trader types, volatility data and whatnot. So there is that if you are an active trader and that's something you're interested in, you can check that out, and I'll show you that in just a second here.
Right.
We'll pull up. But anyway, it's at patreon.com/MMT macro trader. That is where you can find that if it's something you're interested in. But back to your question, will the stock market go down with the April tax strain? Possibly. if I I'm gonna rip on that Daniel Lacal later for hedging his bets a little too much, and I know that's exactly what I'm doing here, but
Oh, that sounds good. Juicy.
Yeah. The way I look at really from all the research I've done is it looks like the fiscal spending that accumulates in the private sector that has this very strong correlation with asset prices. It really seems to be at about a 6-month to a year lag in terms of when it gets fully priced in, right? So if we go on a massive spending binge from the fiscal side of things, it could take a year for that to fully translate into kind of a fully priced into markets. The other thing too is it seems to be more of a longer term trend sort of thing as opposed to day to day. Any spending day to day. There are so many other things that on a day to day basis might actually be the contributing factor to where price goes over the next day, over the next week, over the next month. That spending, obviously the fiscal spending is going to contribute some component of that overall price that the market might have one day to the next. But on a shorter term time frame, I think it weighs less than other variables. So if let's say the government were to hand out $1,000 stimmy checks tomorrow, right? Does that mean then the following day the market should go up per se? No. And I think actually that if something like that were to happen, the determination for price of the market the very next day, might be 0.001% of what determines the market action for that day. Right now, a year from now, I would say that absolutely 50% of the price can now be understood and explained because of the fiscal spending that took place. Right.
Right.
So that's kind of my intuition. That's kind of how I see it. So, going back to the question, will the tax strain affect the markets? It absolutely could, and it certainly makes things a bit more brittle. And if you have kind of compounding weight on an already stressed market, that can cause selling. So certainly, if factors continue to pile up that kind of go against the market, we are in a situation where we could see accelerated selling. With that being said, the factors that I've kept an eye on, the biggest one is the debt ceiling. And as of right now, it's my biggest concern, but maybe, just maybe, we might be in a position where we're going to kick the can down the road another year. Maybe not, though. I mean, it's still up in the air. But if debt ceiling fears really start to pile up, and they pile up right now as the tax drain continues to hit, then yeah, I think we could see some extended selling heading into May. The other thing too, and then I'll let Bijou jump in and give any insight and if he wants. But the other thing is we are heading into OPEX weekend, and this is one of the things that I have been discussing. If you've ever been interested in the volatility and the full kind of package that we have on the Patreon, the second, what I just call the market update, is really a look at kind of the volatility cycle, and we are at the end of the what's called the options expiration cycle. And what happens is when you open up options are you're essentially they're a way to make a leveraged bet. Usually they're used for insurance, but they're a way to make a leveraged bet on the future price of some underlying security. And that options market, those expire out. Those options eventually expire, and they usually expire during the majority of kind of the options expire on the third Friday of the month, which we are hitting coming up this week, and that creates this monthly cyclical cycle where oftentimes, and we're seeing this play out, and I've wanted to see this play out in quite some time because it's for quite some time. This is very indicative of a healthy market, but we're seeing a very compressed volatility, kind of a volatility look to this market. We're seeing, whereas 2-3 weeks ago we were seeing price, especially following the SVB blow up, price really making big swings every day. We'd be up 1% and then down 2% by the close, or down percent as the markets open, but up 2% heading into the close. We were seeing these massive swings, and then over the past week, as we finally headed into the end of OPEX, you start to see this volatility compression take place, and you see very, very small moves. The price range contained within 0.5%, volatility compresses, and this is consistent. This is consistent with really a kind of a healthy bullish market. You get these compressions heading into OPEX. And then OPEX creates this window of opportunity where these options begin to expire out. Usually about a third of all hedging activity that takes place around these options expires out heading into options expiration. So you do have a window of opportunity for volatility to kind of come on in, shake things up before the structural flows kick on in. So we have seen a more normal looking options expiration kind of cycle heading into this Friday. So it wouldn't surprise me tonight in my daily dashboard commentary write up. I did say that I think we could see a bit of selling heading into the end of the week next week, but it still remains to be seen if it's going to be anything more than 1% or 2% pullback before we get kind of the next big push above what has been a hard ceiling now for going on I think almost close to a year now at about 4,200. Yeah, and that's my market take. So that's kind of where we're at. That was pretty long-winded, but to answer your question, was that Tom? Yeah, to answer your question, Tom, that is kind of where we are at, or where I'm at with markets right now.
Sounds good. Yeah, that sounds pretty sensible. It's like you said earlier. It's Steve Keen, bit of a understanding of that, the tax drains, and the government fiscal is pretty cyclical. It all comes around, and if markets are kind of not just completely random, right? And they're factoring in the future always, and so they know that fiscal will come back after the tax drain, and so it's not a thing that you sort of have any fear or dread or doubt about. It's pretty the key with government side of the economy is that it should be sort of fairly predictable.
Yeah, which is exactly what it's not right now, right? Yeah, that's the problem.
So when you got this runner going around the track generating the goods, you start putting a brick wall right in front of them, just boom, like with the debt ceiling thing. Then that's sort of unpredictability. That sort of massive shock is the real problem, not the tax drain so much. Sounds like that's a pretty reasonable assessment that you gave.
Depending on, and usually the banks are kind of ahead of this and they're aware of what's about to happen when the tax drain happens. But depending on certain reserve requirement restrictions that they might have, whether that be because of internal regulation or external regulation with the banks. Sometimes that can cause issues if the tax strains turn out to be a little bit more or less than what was anticipated. So that's one thing that can cause some short-term selling. If we do end up getting selling over the next week, I wouldn't necessarily attribute that solely to the tax strain that is hitting right now, which we did get a pretty big tax strain. I mean, it is definitely happening.
Usually, but so a healthy economy has a higher tax strain.
Yeah. I mean, that's amazingly, that was the problem that we saw last year. 2022 tax strain, largest in history. First time we've been in a at least adjusted for inflation government surplus in on like a 3-month rolling average in over a decade. So we saw that last year. That's exactly what we saw is things really reversed course. And then we saw a market that went down for 6 months straight right after that. So, so there's that. I don't know, Bijou, you keep an eye on the chat. A lot of good conversation already happening. So I'm not sure where we're at. I'm
actually, I've been a bit asleep, just resting my eyes. Yeah. Okay, let's just go with the easiest one. I don't see how it plays out. Oh, responding to Ghost.
I'm scrolling up too.
I have to follow that one properly. By the way, well, while you scroll, why don't you have a scroll of that? I'll just say a little apology to Charles. Can I do that?
I mean, listen, I take a lot of shame in personally apologizing for anything, but if you're a better man than I am, by all means.
Just a little story. It's just a little anecdote I'll give you. Why don't you scan the chat for these questions, just to get them sorted? Because I'm not much up to reading today, although I'll be interested with the Twitter thread that you want to do later. But I'll say this. This is what happened, right? So last week, we had a bit of a back and forth with Charles last week, Douglas and I, about investment and saving versus investment and so forth. So when I went to sleep that night, maybe afterwards, I had this sort of panic that maybe did I completely get things backwards myself? Like, did I totally misunderstand Charles or something? Because we were going on about how it's not savings that comes first. People don't hoard money and then the economy can get going. It's sort of the other way around, right? You have to spend. Someone has to spend more than their income, and the investment goes first, and then savings follow. Savings being the accounting record of past investment. And spending more than your income, the government can always do that, right? If they're issuing a fiat currency, because they're the currency creators, banks with the credit as well, and so that's the way. And it was funny because every so often I get this when I'm with a student or with some friends or something like that. Afterwards, I'll just completely lose track of sort of, did I get that correct or did I just get it like 180 degrees backwards? So I wasn't going to scroll back and check the live stream last week, but I just thought, for a moment, maybe I totally did, because at one point Charles mentioned, but you got to have investment first, and that's correct. So if that was the narrative that if I got that backwards last week, I apologize for that. I got off on a bit of a rant there.
I like it. I like it.
That's the thing happens. I get late at night. I'm thinking, geez, panic. Did I actually get something completely screwed up? But I was also following your cue, so I'll share the blame with you if we got. I think what we said was correct, but I think I might have interpreted Charles incorrectly. Or at one point he corrected something, and it seemed right to me that focus on the investment first. Anyway, did you manage to, while I was filling in?
Yeah, so I did find a question about the take on QE boosting asset prices. Versus kind of did QE boost asset prices? And apparently Steve Keen has said that it did, or seems to indicate that it did. Whereas I think he says that Mosler said that it didn't.
It's an indirect effect.
I don't think it did anything. I'm in the it didn't do anything camp. We did probably a month ago. I showed some research. I got to put this on Twitter is what I got to do so I can pull it up.
Well, especially if they're earning interest on reserves now. If they've got excess reserves, there's not a lot they could do with them.
Well, it depends on. Let me read you the question. Steve said it boosted asset prices. I've heard Warren say before, QE virtually did nothing. Okay. I might, as we go along, if I can maybe do this in real time and talk. I can't do two things at the same time. But if I possibly can find the research that I did, it's still all intact. Then I think Steve Keen said the QE stuff outside of anything that Warren had said at that point. I mean, it was just intuitive to Steve Keen, but the research that I have done has shown. So what I did is I just highlighted out in the research I did ZERP, right? So I mean, we just did kind of QE ZERP, which was effectively 2008 through pre-COVID, right? And really ZERP kind of stopped around, what was it, 2019, I think. Even then, ZERP effectively stopped 2019. And that's also when COVID, or I'm sorry, when QE itself began to fade away. But if you take that time frame and then you adjust the return of the S&P 500 for that time frame versus the rest of what is called non-QE time frame, you don't see any substantial difference in terms of forward returns of the S&P once you adjust for fiscal spending, right? So if fiscal spending sets the trend of price and you adjust for it, what you end up seeing is no change in price that's discernible because of the rate regime over the entire grab of asset prices. Now, the S&P looked pretty flat. The NASDAQ looked a little bit better in a 0% interest rate, but say the Russell looked worse, right? So you're going to have winners and losers in any rate regime. But I would say across the board, QE doesn't actually affect the price of asset prices. What affects the asset prices themselves is actually the fiscal spending, or what can affect the price of the asset on the short run would be the expansion, the endogenous expansion of money, which certainly happened, and you see this play out in the data. This is what happened during the 90s into the great financial crisis. We saw that take place, but I also think there's no evidence, if there is any, I'm not compelled by it to say that higher interest rates or lower interest rates in the sense of QE produces an expansion of credit to increase the private debt load,
Right.
which would then push asset prices higher. I think the determination for that is much more a component of the income level of each, we'll call it each individual agent of the private sector that would be borrowing than it would be because of the interest rate, which, as we're seeing play out over the last year, as it turns out, higher interest rates create a channel for higher income into the private sector, which supports
That does support,
which supports the price structure and all that sort of stuff. So
and it's more supporting the price structure at the moment rather than creating any big bubbles. Bubbles seem to have like asset price bubbles, and that seem to have a little bit of a different dynamic. And I think as Thomas said in the chat, if it's just an asset swap, you take money out of your checking account, put it in the savings account. Essentially, what the QE that Warren is talking about does. You can't see how that's gonna affect much. Any asset prices. It's other behavior as a result of maybe, policy, psychology, that sort of thing that maybe can boost asset prices. So I don't see it as a direct thing. Now, I think, having said that, I think I've heard Warren, I'm a bit vague on this, but I've heard Warren add some nuance to that it can, the policy can do things. But it's escaped my mind, and I'm not going to be able to sort of dredge it back. I think it was on a podcast where he added some nuance to that. But I think he'd stick with his original story, which you just sort of summarized quite well, I think.
All right, I found the research. I found the research, so we can show it live here. Yeah, this is good. This is good. Let's see if it comes up or not. 1 second. There we go. Let me make sure I'm not showing any. Because I have a tab up that has some top secret work going on right now, so I better not click that tab, but I am gonna switch over the window here and show you the research. You know what I'm not doing? Give me 1 second. Bijou, you can now see on your screen my screen. So you know what I'm actually sharing. Here's what I'm showing is I'm showing the SPX adjusted for the what I just called the net deficit at the time. So that is fiscal spending. And then what you can see on this chart is you can see give me 1 second here. What you can see on the chart right now is that, so again, I'm dividing out by the government spending, right? I'm dividing out by the fiscal flow, and you can see from 1980 until 1995, prices effectively flat, right? And that is not I mean, interest rates were slowly coming down at that point, but that was far from a ZERP, a ZERP or a QE. I mean, there's no QE going on. That was far from a ZERP environment. Obviously, we had the dot-com bubble that started in 95 and then finally completed in 2008, and then subsequently during the main QE move, which I guess ZERP stopped in 2015 with QE really kind of unraveling or starting to. They made the first attempt, I think, in 2019 to reverse course in 2019. So again, it doesn't, to my eye, maybe slightly lifted during that time frame relative to what you would expect from the fiscal channel, but I'm not seeing anything that's like, oh yeah, man, 0% interest rates plus QE just absolutely inflated asset prices. To me, the increase in asset prices following the Great Financial Crisis was primarily caused by the fiscal spending that took place following the Great Financial Crisis. And I think I've got some other charts, but here's the NASDAQ, which certainly the NASDAQ seemed to outperform relative to what it did from 1980 till 1995 before the big dot-com boom. We definitely did seem to outperform with a 0% interest rate and QE policy compared to a time frame when that didn't happen and we weren't having a massive credit bubble. So I will give you that, but I don't know if I pulled up the Russell here. Did I have the Russell? I don't know. I don't know what else I did after that point because I never labeled it. But I know the Russell underperformed. So again, I think it's a gauge thing. I think it's there's going to be winners and losers. It's just there's new winners and losers depending on what the policy decision is.
Yeah, that sounds about right. That's good. That's a good overview. Yeah. There's a bit of nuance there, not a simple story. What assets are you talking about exactly? How does it work? What's the dynamics? It's probably not QE. It's probably more fiscal. Yeah, that's a good summary.
Speaking of which, actually, I'll add this too. Speaking of picking winners and losers, McDonald's made a new all-time high.
Oh yeah.
So.
Oh really?
Yeah.
I had a strategy. Yeah.
So McDonald's had a new all-time high, whereas I had
a strategy for that. Strategy for this, for all the Silicon Valley entrepreneurs who are creating vaporware and have too much money, they don't know how to secure it and secure deposits.
Yeah.
Right. So you just bail them out, but you let the bank fail. You bail the deposit holders out with McDonald's vouchers. That'll guarantee very short lifetimes.
I like that. Yeah, I like that.
Just a gentle way to get rid of them all.
I like that. The point about bringing up McDonald's, though, is just that there are winners and losers depending on the interest rate regime, right? And I don't disagree that a company like Beyond Meat, let's say, is going to lose, right? I mean, Beyond Meat doesn't make any profit. It doesn't make any meat either. But Beyond Meat,
what is that? What's that one?
Beyond Meat is the fake
vegan.
Yeah, is the fake meat. They were, let's see, BYND is the ticker symbol. So, there's no doubt that in an environment, in a zero interest rate environment, a company like Beyond Meat is going to have the ability to be a profitless company for longer, right?
Right.
Uh, and the valuation of that company, Jesus, I'm going to pull this chart out because it's kind of a sight to behold here. We'll swing over to this chart, but here's the Beyond Meat chart, which during the height of the COVID boom, post-COVID boom in terms of the market, and then actually before COVID, this was a $250 stock, now sitting at $15. Not a good look, but
where's COVID there on that chart?
COVID is
in the middle.
Well, this is the post-COVID boom right here. This is the IPO before COVID, but Beyond Meat a couple times been kind of a darling of the stock market. It turns out people just like meat as opposed to fake meat. And then here's MCD. I can pull up McDonald's. Whoops. Making a new all-time high. MCD. Pulling it off. So again, winners and losers. That's the big thing. I remember I was actually on a debate on another YouTube channel. This was right as it was looking like interest rates were really going to start to skyrocket, because that's what the Fed was attempting to do. And I remember in this debate, the guy didn't really want to listen to me, but it was very clear to him that housing prices would go up, and to his mind that since there would be some losers, all people would be losers in a high interest rate environment that would kill the economy. And the point I tried to make is, but eventually the income, the fresh income will get supplied and will support that higher price channel. There'll be winners and losers, and even then, we're seeing housing kind of come back on stronger than expected, and that sort of thing. It's because it's a regauging. It's there are new winners and losers, and in this instance, it's McDonald's. So anyway, I'll digress. On the
there are ways for governments to actually not make the rate hikes a repeller long term by just increasing fiscal at the bottom, where people are where you'd otherwise get losers, right? Who are people having to spend more on their credit card and take out more loans. If you support them with higher incomes, wages at the bottom, then they suddenly turn into people who can repay their debts. And so the high interest rates become just a continual regauge the currency downwards and prices upwards. So if you understood it, you could just operate high interest rates as your way of generating a moderate constant inflation rate. I don't think it's a good way to do it. Because it requires other policy to support it, right? Lower incomes at the base have to rise. So I don't know. It's just a dumb way, if you ask me, if you're a policymaker, and that's how you want to stimulate the economy with high interest rates. But that's what all those characters do, right? They're just thinking mainstream economics, that it's sort of going to break things a bit, not realizing that the government is a huge net payer of interest. If they've got a lot of, if they're still issuing treasury bonds and they've got a lot of outstanding, they still have to pay good on. Then it's just an income injection into the economy in a very regressive way. By the way, I don't know if the chat does much on Twitter, but I have seen a fair few people knocking Warren for his little short tweets on how the economy is fairly bullish. Or it's not huge. I wouldn't say we're in a bubble era or anything. It just looks fairly consistently quite strong against most pundits' sort of predictions.
Correct. Yep.
And so Warren is just pointing that out, and he gets a lot of flack for when does this guy ever say anything negative? It's like, so everyone wants the economy to crash for some reason, and it's like actually the government in a very perverse way is keeping it going.
Let's see. I'm
It's crazy times. This always happens with current understanding of economics and how policymakers react and how central bankers react. It always has these sort of weird knee-jerk, driven pendulum at the wrong frequency kind of effects.
Yep.
And so COVID just kicked in a whole lot of sort of interesting policy. Some of it right, you got to inject money. You got to send out the payments when people are off work and all that. And but it's not always in the right way. You could have given people little jobs to do in their community.
Yeah.
And help the elderly and the sick with Meals on Wheels, all that sort of thing. And you certainly didn't have to give a lot of handouts to the wealthy and the professors and the doctors. As Randy Ray said, he didn't need the stimulus checks, but took them. And so all these interesting changes in policy occurred because of COVID. And they're pushing and pulling in all sorts of directions. So you get this sort of turbulent economy and all that. I don't know. Does that show up in the volatility in
terms of
in terms of increased volatility in prices? I was thinking like maybe not short run, because it's not a market psychology effect, but can you see it longer run, like during the last year or so, or is that not the case? I'm not saying it should. I'm just saying that COVID was this kicker, and the policy reactions weren't always uniformly the best, right? They push and pull a little bit, and it's just very sort of weird dynamic that's making, I think, a bit of turbulence, and it's really hard to say whether it's all good or all bad. It's not. It's just some good, some bad.
Yeah, we've had
getting richer.
We've definitely had slightly higher than. Our spikes were a little bit more volatile. To a certain extent, we saw some massive compression of volatility right after COVID, but we've had a little bit more turbulent ride. It's hard.
That's what I should have said. The actual volatility shouldn't have gone up, but it might have changed quite a lot.
Yeah,
either compressed or
compressed and
compressed again.
Yeah, we've been seeing a bit.
Okay,
of it.
Anyway, yeah. Were you about to say something else?
I don't know. I did have something. Speaking about markets being bullish, or just not markets being bullish per se, but the economy being bullish and so many people being wrong. That's one thing I wanted to hit on tonight, just to take. I don't know. I feel like I kind of deserve a victory lap, to be quite honest. So I was going to take a victory lap, and part of the reason for that is some of these anti-MMT people that are out there just continue to think that we're on the fast track to recession, and that there's some decision that the Fed has to make between causing a massive recession or keeping inflation coming along, right? To me, that's just an asinine understanding of things, right? Not only is it a misunderstanding of what the Fed is actually capable of doing, right? And not doing with the interest rate lever that they have, but it's also a misunderstanding of how and what actually drives what we would call kind of the financial economy anyway, right? So from when that argument gets made, it's wrong from two separate ways. Like, they've managed to screw it up as much as is feasibly possible when they make that sort of argument. And the guy that has been making that argument as of late, and I feel like I just kind of need to dunk on him for a while.
Want to get out in the car and throw a few darts at the board. Yeah. It's really interesting because we do have a lot of financial fragility, but we've also, governments and central banks have realized they can do whatever it takes to bail out situations. Yeah. So, Greece went really bad, but and they still got a lot of young people leaving the country and all that. I don't know if it's fully
resolved
and all that much better situation now than before, but it certainly could have just become a sort of a ghost country.
Yep.
And it didn't, because the ECB stepped in, right? So governments, whether they realize it or not, or whether they make it, they don't maybe do it in a great way for social equity or not, but they do know how to support the financial side of the economy. And so a purely financial crisis, the whole SVB bank thing and all that, it's a really good illustration. It's like people just losing their marbles over it, and it's like, just is the Federal Reserve and Treasury and the other central banks around the world, if there's a knock-on effect, are they just going to be able to come in and insure deposit holders, make people whole again? And it's a bit of a, you might think it's a bit dodgy with it, what they'll actually do. But they've sort of shown their hand, right? They'll do what it takes to support the financial sector, and so it's very hard to actually be very bearish when you're talking about the financial side of the economy, and the financial side is a huge aspect now. And so, what really can create another Great Depression or a real recession, a really bad crash? You got to think about what actually, where is it actually going to come from?
Yeah.
After COVID, everyone's desperate for jobs, and even though they're crummy jobs, sometimes it's sort of back to work, and then who's going to lay us off now, except for another virus? So the economy is going to keep going along, and as long as the governments keep putting in the money that the people at the bottom can pay off their debts at the higher interest rate, the things, like I said, could go on a very dystopian way for a long time. But by which I mean just wealth inequality grows, but the economy is still just going to keep going along. So you just get a lot more really wealthy people.
Which
and then you can say, how are they going to cause a recession? Well, it's only going to be by some sort of really weird neo-feudalist dynamics where they just become so powerful that they're just going to like crush the poor, and they'll end up shooting themselves in the foot because they'll realize, rich people don't create anything. So it's all the workers that create all the goods. So I don't see that happening, and so I see things in this end of the neoliberal era just becoming very neo-feudalistic times sort of thing, which you don't get recessions in, right? The rich just get richer, the poor are still working. We still got stuff to buy and sell, and things just keep chugging along like that until there's some other dynamic, like the workers will just get fed up, and it's like, we've had enough of this. We want actual democracy, not the pretense of democracy. But that's a really longer term social dynamic. It's not the financial, it's not the finance system. Which, although however cruddy it is and horrible it is, governments have learned that they can always support it, and they do.
Actually, I should go this direction. Thomas D.
So,
I saw that. I saw that.
up?
Well, yeah, I do. But Thomas D. pointed out. I ran across this tweet as well. With total debt and liabilities at 220 trillion. And 4.6 trillion of expected tax revenue. The U.S. is like a person with $100,000 salary and debt to $100,000 salary and debt of $5 million. And get this, they're about to take out a new credit card. Yeah, I saw that tweet today as well. Elon Musk responded to it. It's like, this is terrible. This is terrible. Jesus Christ,
this is gonna crash everything. Have to rob our grandchildren. Oh dear. Guys are nuts. But it is like a flip. It's one of those 180-degree things when once you realize you've just had it completely backwards. It's like if you're strong enough to admit it, it's like one of those moments. Like I said, I had a little moment of that last week after the live stream. You sort of have that sort of adrenaline rush of fear and panic, like, did I say something really stupid? But these characters, like, they've been saying this for decades and decades and decades. Or at least as long as they've been alive and cognizant. So it's like, how do they back down from it? I don't know, man.
So I have data going back. I mean, I've even gathered some data going all the way back to the founding of this country in terms of Treasury data, right? So the U.S. sans a few points of time that amazingly preceded massive recessions or depressions, despite those times, has ran a consistent deficit, right? And we've had a national debt for over 200 and some odd years of the history of this country. Any analogy that's a household analogy.
Any minute now.
Any analogy.
It's gonna
Any analogy that's an analogy that's a household analogy. Explain to me the credit card company that continues to lend to you for 200 and whatever 70 some odd years when you've continued to run up a debt, right? Even on the face value of it, how do you continue to make that point? And we have headlines going back to the 80s, recorded headline, video evidence of politicians making that argument, right? Going all the way back to the Reagan era. It was really, we're about to hit whatever it is, 50 billion on the deficit on the debt, and it's like, okay, if
with that McCarthy one that you you responded to the other day.
If going from 50 billion to 100 billion didn't cripple the nation, why all of a sudden going from 30 to 40 trillion is going to cripple it? Like what? I mean,
They had no idea.
Yeah,
it's interesting looking at the editorial the cartoons on this too. So I think Stephanie Kelton has a PowerPoint slide deck where she's got a few of them. And at one time, I was preparing a slide deck for a similar sort of talk to people in New Zealand here, and or class, and so I actually dug around and got even more, even sort of bigger little scrapbook of those editorial cartoons where the national debt, is this monster, this big hairy monster, and there's a whole lot of them, and the cartoons are really funny and they're really creative, and it's just hilarious that this has got it completely backwards, and it's really fascinating sort of anthropological stuff for anthropologists, financial anthropologists.
Yeah.
They're going to have a field day, once MMT gets to be understood.
What was that TV show? The Twilight Zone back in the 50s or 60s, whenever that was, right? And the aliens drop that book, and they can't read what it is, but then finally the woman, cracks the code, or I forget how the episode goes, and she realizes at the very end that the people that they'd gathered up to bring on this alien space station and everything, that they're going to show what this alien space station looks like, is they're actually ingredients for the meal that the aliens are about to make. And she's screaming at the very end, it's a cookbook. It's a cookbook. Yeah, serving mankind. Yeah. Serving mankind. Yeah, they're here to serve mankind. Yeah, that was the joke. Yeah. Yeah, guys, it's been years. It's been 20 years since my dad probably showed me that episode.
I don't quite get there, but it sounds funny.
Yeah. So they're about to, the aliens are going to eat the people, and the book that they found was a cookbook. It's a cookbook. They're serving mankind. And I feel like 2,000 years from now, when we're living in utopia, well, not us, we'll be dead, but when our AI infused children have 2,000-year-old lives that they can live in the utopian future that we should have today, they're going to look back as anthropologists. They're going to be digging in, discovering what life was like in 2023, and they're going to be like, they had it backwards. They thought it was the national debt. It's the national savings. They had it. They were destroying their wealth. Anyway, the aliens are eating us.
It's really interesting too, because yes, it's a good analogy. Yeah, there's a few people in the sort of venture philanthropy, social impact space that are aware of Stephanie Kelton and co. And it's interesting because I'll be in on a webinar thing or whatever, and someone will mention how I'm just randomly picking a country. I think it was Indonesia, maybe Malaysia, and they'll be saying how they've the government has this plan, they're gonna do blah blah blah, and it kind of sounds okay. There might be some investments in climate mitigations or whatever it is, they're sort of saying the right sort of things, and then all of a sudden it's like, and they're gonna reduce the government deficit, get the house of fiscal health in order, and I'm like, you can't do both at the same time.
Yeah.
You got the book of Stephanie Kelton, but have you read it?
Jeez, yeah. It's I don't know. I
mantelpiece. Yeah. Anyway,
I don't know. Something about the psychology of
and the paradigm shifts take a while to happen.
Yeah. Let's see. The tweet that I have up right now is a series that and this Daniel LaCal has been on a mission as of late to go after MMT, which I appreciate. I mean, it kind of keeps the hype going. But he had a very I mean, his stuff is very sophomoric. It lacks any real any real thought, but he's very popular. He's absolutely, but he's absolutely eaten up by the mids out there, right? I mean, if you're just an average Joe economic type, you're going to eat this guy alive because he's gonna feed you.
Yeah.
The exact
what you want.
yeah, right. Not going to be too much sophistication, not going to be too hard to understand. But he's been dogging on MMT, and so I thought what I'd do is I thought I'd dig into some of his past, particularly around like the beginning of the year, or the end of last year, when it was very apparent to me that the calls for recession were quite overblown. And I'll show you my receipts, and then we'll kind of look at his receipts. So here was my post from December 16th of 2022, where I said, here's the best bull case. And at the time, so the bull case for 2023, right? So at the end of 2022, things were looking pretty, I'm going to pull the word grisly here because that's what's on the screen. Things were looking pretty grisly. They were not looking good, but my case was effectively kind of the MMT case. Look, higher interest rates are going to supply a lot of potent energy to the private sector, through the income channel, and we're seeing a lot of spending, so that should support markets. Come January, it was becoming very evident that we were seeing a strong acceleration of those flows starting to hit. We see a large turnaround compared to what we saw in 2022, which I think was really the reason we saw stocks sell off in 2022. So that was my MMT kind of understanding, right? And the point of all of this is, one, to kind of take a mini victory lap, just to say MMT gets it right. But the question is, how do we understand this? And then why did the other side get it so wrong, or did the other side get it so wrong? And so I did some searching, and if you go far enough back to that same time frame, this is a recent tweet. Yeah. Anyway, central banks are going to choose recession over inflation. Exactly what we were talking about earlier, right? That this is coming from the end of December. That higher interest rates are going to create a recession, right? There's this understanding, especially when you're kind of from an Austrian standpoint, or any standpoint that operates off a fixed regime. You're going to come to this conclusion, and it's a bad conclusion, right? I mean, he was wrong. This is a guy that sells services for people, for investors and finance people, right? Why is this understanding so wrong? So I've got quite a few little links here and pieces that he put together back in January, back in December, talking about recession risk. A lot of this is related to, again, there's a YouTube video, and you can check all this out, where he says essentially the same thing, that the Fed might have to cause this recession. So why trouble ahead? Again, this is back in January. Earnings recession risk is evident. Weaker sales, et cetera, all this stuff back at the end of last year, beginning of this year. Why were they so wrong? Why did this guy get it so wrong? And why, if you're going to take and try and take any advice from someone like this, what should you understand that he gets so wrong? He has the interest rate thing backwards. He has it backwards, and that is why he is so wrong. And people should clown on this guy. I mean, he's out here giving advice. Things are going to get bad. Things are going to get bad. Things didn't get bad after at the end of after we started seeing the settling at the end of last year, right? Are they great? No, but flows are still coming on board. Certainly, there's been a re-gauging, but we are not in recessionville. And this MMT case, which is the base MMT case that was being made by myself and Warren Mosler at the end of last year, is what won out, and we've been seeing that take place. Now, it can get completely derailed, right? I mean, if at the end of the day, if those in Washington decide that the debt ceiling crisis is something they want, my narrative gets derailed, but it gets derailed for the reason that we're aware of, and that would be that it's the fiscal side of things. So I saw a lot of our crowd dunking on Daniel, and I thought I would join on in and point out that this guy has a I mean, if you're following this guy for advice, obviously you've probably lost a lot of money at this point, but but I thought I'd add in to the dunking on him train.
You wonder though if some of these types are not actually investors or traders, and they're just armchair economists.
He works for publishes investment information. I mean, I know that. I think he manages money. So this guy specifically.
So the people following his, so he's actually got clients.
Yeah.
I was thinking more of the people who
chief
follow him,
accountants,
just the social media type. But if he's actually influencing trades, it's kind of interesting question that you raised.
Yeah.
Maybe do people realize they're losing money off him, or it's like, oh no, damn, bad luck.
Yeah.
It was just our bad luck.
Yeah, exactly. And that's exactly. It's because the market doesn't really realize the risk here. Or something like that.
It really hasn't responded correctly. The market wasn't quite right because government put this sticky finger into it.
Exactly. Yeah. I will tell you this though, and I wanted to change gears and bring up this tweet right here that he made, because a lot of the MMT crowd that I followed was dunking on him with his prior tweet, and then they came back to add on to this tweet. But I want to talk about this because I kind of agree. Government does not create wealth; it consumes it, and I actually think he's closer to MMT than he realizes. It would just kind of depend on how he actually defines wealth, right?
Yes. Yeah. Right.
But
also it's not quite right. I mean, government employs wealth. You think about what's the most precious resource you've got in your economy? Labor. Government employs a lot of labor. I don't know. Can you call employing people to sort of work for public services? Can you call that consuming the real wealth, the real resources, the labor?
Yeah,
it's more like just employing it. So I mean, I see what you mean, but I still disagree with
the sentiment. Yeah.
It's not quite nuanced enough for me. You got to say the government is a massive employer of labor for providing social services, massively lowers the costs for businesses, and really helps the economy by consuming quote unquote labor. It does take labor out of the private sector. So in that sense, it's taking away resources from the private sector.
It is consuming. And it's kind of the way that I looked at this, because I think from kind of an MMT perspective, we would want to say that the aim of the government should be to create the playing field that creates the most amount of goods and services that it can consume, right? That what the government wants is a surplus of output that it can easily consume for public purpose without creating inflation by consuming it, right?
Yeah. Right.
If there was only 10 widgets being made and the demand from the private sector for those 10 widgets was 11 and the government stepped in and bought 5 of them, that would create a lot of it. That created a lot of inflation, right? The government needed 5, right? So
and you got to consider, you get pretty healthy, you get pretty good countries when the public purpose or the public at large want a big government. You get pretty good countries. In those cases.
Yeah.
I mean, because it's what people want, right? If the country doesn't want big government, they're going to vote for the small government types, and you get a small-ish government, and you won't get as many public services, so you'll be paying a higher price to get them from the private sector. And if that's what the people want, that's kind of what they will maybe sort of get roughly. I'm not saying democracy works all that well, right? But there's an element of democracy in a lot of nations these days. Certainly not. I always keep saying we don't live in a democracy, but it has a little bit of an effect. And countries where the people at large generally want a lot of public services, they pretty good countries. If you look around the world, pretty nice places to live.
Yeah.
But it's not having a bloated big government. I think I'm just theorizing here, but isn't that a bit of the problem with the United States? Is that you've got a really interesting nation. It's really sort of polarized. So what you get is every now and again, you get a bit of an increase in the bloat of government, which is a little bit wasteful and inefficient. And then the other time, you get people sort of tearing government down and reducing social services. And it's like they grab what they can. So the people who want a stronger government build up what they can, and the GOP and the folks who get in, who can tear down government, tear down what they can. but they're not building up and tearing down always the right things. So you can get United States, which is could be considered a big government, but big and sometimes in the wrong way.
So let me
small and sometimes the wrong way as well.
Yeah,
right? You want Medicare for all, but you don't want a huge social welfare just because you want people to be happy and healthy and working.
Yeah. You know how like people find like left and right politically very unsatisfying to define what left and right is, right? Until they also want not just on the x-axis, but they want something on the y-axis as well to measure, right? I also think
the political map.
I also think government size, right? When we talk about government size, we should probably discuss it in those terms too, right? So you might have a taller, we'll call it, the size would be tall or short, right? But then, which I think some people that would be kind of what would be more like a tall government would be a more bloated government, right, on the extreme, and then a short government would be something that's very, very little services. I'm just kind of thinking out loud here, right? But then we also would want another axis as well, and that axis would be a wide or narrow government, right? So a narrow government would be the power is concentrated to very few people, right? So it might be a democracy, it might be it could be, I mean, the US I would call a tall but narrow government, right? It's
I see what you mean.
The power isn't spread, it isn't evenly distributed to right, but it has a lot of bloat. It's big, but it doesn't really have the services that benefit as many people as possible, given what the US spends every year, right? So I think an ideal government would be a government that is as tall as possible before it starts to have waste, kind of waste output on bureaucratic endeavors, but is also as wide as possible, as reasonable, but still have the kind of strength necessary to be a cohesive government, right?
You don't want your military going around on insane exercises for wars that aren't going to happen unless you make them happen. And you don't want so you don't want a strong military if you're the United States. You don't really have many natural enemies in that. I mean, it's just really bloated, the military, and it's all we know why. And also, you don't want all these the IRS chasing around people for tax payments that you really don't need to have as much revenue. All the human waste of effort that goes into trying to collect taxes that don't really need to be levied in order to keep the currency stable. You sort of overtaxed but Ken, I think I'm not sure I have to trust Ken on that, because I probably would agree that it's been shrinking for a little bit. I mean, there was an increase in government size pretty much over the whole world during the quote unquote Keynesian era, and that was good. But to the neoliberal era, I wouldn't be surprised if over the neoliberal era, so the last 50 years or so, its government maybe has been shrinking a little bit. But as a percentage of GDP, so where is the rest of the spend in the economy coming from? The credit card booms and all that, and household debt. So, do you have a? I don't know, Douglas. Do you have a sort of awareness of that shrinking of government as a percentage of GDP? I think the sentiment I'd sort of agree with over the neoliberal era. There's been a lot more privatization.
I'd have to.
There's been a lot.
I just have to run the numbers. He could be right. Yeah,
I don't know.
Yeah,
could be right, but I'm not sure if it's like, I'm not sure if that's what we're talking about. It's like government could still increase in keep the percentage of GDP roughly constant, not too much, but you could still have a bad situation where all of the government spending and investment is like, financialized and so forth. It's not generating any real output, and just a whole lot of rentier. It's a rentier economy, which is where the United States has sort of been going. And that, to me, that's the really thing to worry about: is do you have a rentier economy rather than a real resource economy? That's what I would think is the most crucial thing. So I think you can have a small government, like Douglas said, if you wanted to, and if you don't mind having the private sector, carrying most of the burden for increasing spending. It just means you can't have as many savers, so you can't have as many millionaires if you have a small government in that sense. But in the other sense, what was the other sense? I've lost track of what the tall and wide was.
Yeah.
But in the other sense, you can have you don't want to have such a small government that you don't have a lot of public services, because those are the key things that support a healthy private sector, is all the services that government provides. And like you said, you don't want that to grow too much either, because then you have everyone, providing healthcare and old age care and all that, and no one growing the microchips and the sneakers and the t-shirts that you want. So you don't want to take everyone out of the private sector, and there's no magic formula for that ratio. Right?
Yeah. Which no magic formula brings me to the next point I want to talk about. Actually, that it'll be a good transition. If not to cut you off, if you want to.
That's about
put
it.
a bow on that. But big discussion going on Twitter. Richard Murphy with a article that he finished out. So I didn't catch the start of this, nor have I even read this article. So I guess this is something we can kind of do together live right now.
Okay, let's do it.
We're going to go ahead and move over to that screen. Here's his response. It's a very long response. Maybe, thankfully, you can tell he's a creature of the internet, because he did a TLDR right out of the gate. And I appreciate how he structured this entire thing.
Oh, yeah.
But on April 7th, Mosler posted a paper on Twitter, which he claimed presented the fundamentals of MMT. I disagreed with him on that issue on Twitter, and at the time was challenged to provide a response. Mosler did not present a coherent argument as to what MMT might be in his paper. He did, in Murphy's opinion, present an argument suggesting that a jurisdiction without a government might be better off than one with a government operating MMT.
Really?
I've never heard.
I've never seen that.
I've never heard this before.
He's interpreting Mosler's description of MMT as an argument for something in his own head. Is that what he's doing?
Yeah, maybe.
I'll have to dig into this.
If anyone in chat can make sense of that point, I read through these already. And that one was a little bit head scratching to me.
I think that's a bit head scratcher there. Richard has been to MMT conferences and is friendly terms with some of the MMTs.
Okay.
The background, right?
Yeah. And Warren, if you happen to be listening, I know you've tuned into these in the past. So if you happen to be listening, you want to jump on, by all means. You've got my email. You've got my Twitter. Hit me up. We'll get you on and we can chat. Mosler's description of an economy fails to take into account the existence of commercial banks and their capacity to create money. I mean, this one is bizarre to me.
Bizarre. That's an old attack on MMT that post-Keynesians and others have been making for a long time. That MMT doesn't realize banks create money. Geez, I mean, I even heard a good friend, Steve Keen, I think at one time. Okay, let's say my imaginary friend, Steve Keen, because I can't pull up the reference and all that right now. But I'm pretty sure in the back of my head I've heard. Okay, maybe I shouldn't say it, but I've heard someone, a post-Keynesians, attack MMT for not understanding banks create most of the money. And not understanding endogenous money. And when that came up, I think it was actually on one of those younger MMT type YouTube channels that was just starting up. I forget who it was now. It's a bit vague. It was quite a few years ago. But this point was raised, and immediately, if you've read any Randall Ray or anyone, I mean, Warren focuses on highly macro stuff.
Yeah.
But it's always been the MMT case that it came out of post-Keynesian economics and is a superset of post-Keynesian economics. So MMT has always understood banks create credit money. So now in 2023, you're really coming up with this bullet point? It's like, what? It's like, I don't know. It's bizarre. So it's certainly it certainly should drive people to go and read Mosley's paper, which is a good thing. Check out the credibility of these bullet points here. Anyway, keep going.
So this one's a little odd because obviously he does the follow up, and I would say the implication would be that ultimately banks can pay. The money that banks create can be part of the tax payment. My guess is he'll get there. Whoops, I didn't mean to do that. Next up, Mosler incorrectly represents that the primary purpose of taxation is to create unemployment when this is not the case. I don't think I've ever heard...
Oh, that's an interesting one.
I don't think I've ever heard him say that the purpose of taxation is to create unemployment. His point is that there wouldn't be unemployment definitionally if there wasn't taxation, right? Like, I mean, we define the person as unemployed because they can't get dollars that they desire. Now, on an individual level, you might not care about the dollars, but someone that would be giving them to you for employment, right, paying you. Does he say that the primary purpose of taxation is to create unemployment, Ken? Is that how he...
Yeah. Okay, Mosel is correct. That is basically what Ron says, and Richard Murphy is wrong. But you've got to have you sort of have to have
I get what you're saying.
to get it.
Yeah, I get what you're saying.
The purpose of the tax is to create a demand for the currency. That immediately creates unemployed people looking to earn the currency. And then that allows the government to spend their otherwise worthless currency to hire people. So the point is that it's got to be said like this, and this is the way I always say it. So the purpose of taxation in the first place from inception is to create unemployment for the purpose of then immediately hiring all your unemployed. If you don't say that, you're going to get it wrong. So Murphy's saying it the wrong way. It's like the Steve Keen import-export argument that Ken PDX and others raised in the chat earlier. It's like you got to say exports are a real cost, not exports are a cost. So MMT is full of these little things where you just insert the correct word and it all makes sense, and it's all really pretty clear. But it's the hut tax story, right?
Yeah.
I thought Murphy understood this, so it's
I'm gonna have to go back and actually listen to. I'm gonna actually have to go back and listen to some of the stuff Mosler says, because I could have sworn he qualifies the taxation thing. I understand that the taxes drive unemployment, but in my mind, I mean, I would say the primary purpose of taxation is to give the currency value so it can provision, so the government can provision itself.
Yes, by hiring the people that they just unemployed.
Yeah.
So the case, it's residual unemployment. Yeah. Residual unemployment is a problem. It's the same issue people have with the government deficit. It's just a residual. Why the hell are you caring about it? But in the case of unemployment, it's a little different because it's a social equity problem. Why you care about residual unemployment? You care because you're the currency monopolist. You created the unemployment in the first place with your tax. And if the private sector is saving more than it's spending net in the macro, someone's got to spend more than their income to hire the residual unemployed. So that has to be the government. The point is that the government can always hire the unemployed. So there's no point in having any unemployment. It's just a stupid policy mistake. And so it just annoys me that Richard's totally misrepresenting MMT here and just cherry picking some of the points. But he's technically correct. That's what Mosler says. It's just that that's not the only thing that Warren says. He says that the purpose is then to hire all the people you just unemployed.
It's in a
context. I mean,
it's in a
that's
larger
the whole
context.
Point of it.
Yeah.
And residual unemployment, that's just a policy mistake. That's people not understanding the system. It's not understanding.
Yeah.
That tax indeed creates the unemployment. So if you don't understand that,
then
you're going to have an issue with maybe residual unemployment. People who are unemployed who are still looking to earn the currency. And so I think, again, it's one of these cases where you've got a friendly MMT, friendly fire, and, it's really going to damage damage us if people take Richard to be credible when he's just showing he's not credible. I mean, he's a good person, but good people make bad mistakes.
Let's see. Mosler also, in his opinion, misrepresents the cause of inflation by suggesting that it is always created by government action. My guess, maybe I'm wrong here. Someone, by all means, fix my thought process here. But I think what he's saying is that he hears Mosler say that that inflation, academically defined, is the interest rate that the Fed sets, right? Now, Murphy is likely reading that saying that the government is, the first cause of inflation, right?
Right.
And what Mosler isn't saying is that, if a nuclear bomb went off on half of, the production of whatever, that the world subsisted on, let's just say all the food produced in the U.S. could no longer be consumed, right? You're going to get price inflation because of that, especially if the government spends money. It's going to be price inflation that we would say is kind of classic inflation, right?
Yeah. Inflation is more complicated than Mosler and Murphy are here kind of debating, because the government is definitely the source of the price level. And under an MMT system, when it's a fiat currency and it's on a floating exchange rate and you're not tied to gold or anything like that. If you're tied to gold, or you peg to gold, and you're going to back up that promise to redeem for gold, then you're not going to be necessarily able to control the price level, because someone comes along and discovers a huge new gold mine that's going to affect the relative prices, relative price story and all that. But in the MMT system, in theory, the government is the source of the price level. And what is inflation? It's a continuous change in the price level upwards. And so, in that sense, the government is, I guess you could say, responsible, whatever determines the inflation rate, because they're the currency monopoly. And if inflation is coming from too much bank credit, that's still the government, because all the banks are licensed by the government. Which Warren said. So
allowed to, and
again, I would say Murphy's not. He's only slightly misrepresenting Warren there. But it's a subtler one. Inflation is a lot subtler than unemployment. Unemployment to me is a simpler one. It's the most important one. You don't care what the inflation rate is if you've got a fiat currency. You care about social equity and real goods output. And the way to maximize that is to have full employment in non-bullshit jobs. And that's the way to go. Which brings me to, I just want to quickly go back to Ghost on Half Shell. Creditors can always hoard money. Yes, I agree. And so they can and do force unemployment. No, they can't. I mean, anyone that the private sector is not hiring, the government is then free to hire without bidding up the wage. So it's a government policy misunderstanding, policy mistake that causes the unemployment. And it's like we keep discussing this. I keep mentioning this with the live stream almost every other week. Don't I, Douglas? That what you really want is a private sector that unemploys as many people as possible.
A private sector.
In a sense, we want the fewest people creating the most goods as possible.
Oh yeah.
That leaves everyone else to have huge leisure time. Like you can have a 3-hour work week.
Yeah. Yep.
But the point is no single person then is unemployed. It's like you've just unemployed a whole lot of your time.
Yep.
Your personal time is now free up, but you're still putting in a few hours a week, getting a decent wage.
Yep.
You know, that's how to do things.
Doing something.
But anytime the private sector increases their unemployment, that's a win. It's just the governments make it not a win by failing to hire all the newly unemployed. So I would say Warren's correct on that, and Murphy and the other code, they haven't caught up. I don't think they just haven't caught up. And Warren's not talking about the world as it is. He's talking about the world, how the MMT description of things, how it could be, is often what I think Warren gets attacked for, because he's saying how it could be. And everyone's saying, yeah, but that's not how it is.
Yeah.
So that's the story with unemployment. And inflation is a little bit subtler, but it's a similar story there. Like, government is the source of the price level if they're an MMT system. But if you don't understand that you are the source of the price level, then inflation can be generated by, competition between labor and capital. The whole classical mechanism that post-Keynesians and Marxists talk about, that's definitely going to cause some inflation if you don't have government supporting labor with like job guarantee or public sector hiring and all that. You want to get rid of the wage bargaining spiral process by just having a wage floor underneath the economy, so that workers aren't desperate for bosses to work in bullshit jobs and constantly try to demand more wages. Take that wage bargaining issue out, and then you don't have that particular source of inflation that all the post-Keynesians, they cry about. That MMT doesn't understand it. It's all the wage bargain, blah blah blah, and it's not. It's still the government is the source of the price level. It's just that the government is allowing the competition between wage and capital to get out of hand. There, that's what happened in the 70s, and that's what could happen today. Although unions are so weak, it's kind of hard to. There definitely hasn't been the source of the current inflation. Unions have maybe here and there won a few battles, but it's very pathetic. So it's not coming from that source. So there's more nuance there than I think Richard is trying to pull out, and it's just a bit frustrating.
All right, so last up, the argument Mosler makes for a job guarantee are consequently based on what I think are to be false premises. Obviously, if he's not going to agree with each argument building up to the conclusion, he's going to say it's built on false premises. So be it. It's a very long article. I don't think I'm going to skim through. I don't think I'm going to skim through the whole thing, but.
Okay. When I'm feeling better, I'll read it. Yeah. I actually made a promise to him. I got on early on Twitter and mentioned a couple of things that he misrepresents MMT on, because he asked people, and he said, what am I getting wrong with MMT? And I said, well, here's two things. And that was only me reading the abstract and the conclusions.
Yeah.
The first and the last, and skipping everything in between. Because I wasn't up to experiencing the pain of reading someone like that again. But maybe I should promise to do that, or time permitting. I want to get onto other things as well, but it's an interesting. It's always an interesting exercise to read these MMT friendly people who have a bit of fire and just figuring things out for yourself. You can figure things out for yourself. Good excuse to go and read Warren's paper again.
Yeah.
Probably is a lot shorter.
Yeah.
And yeah. Okay. That's a good one. It's an interesting one to go to if you enjoy the read and you enjoy the kind of intellectual tugs of war and that sort of thing here. But yeah, I wouldn't go and sort of be nasty to Richard because he is MMT friendly. It's just
too late, man. Too late. Next week's thumbnail is going to be his avatar face in clown makeup or whatever.
Okay.
We're done. I'm kidding. Although I really don't, I really have a thing against the tax people. Like anyone who wants to,
Right.
I don't know.
Yeah, yeah.
That kind of grinds my gears. See, he's probably pro union too, right? I don't know.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah,
I
probably.
mean,
He's
MNTs can be pro-union. It's just that you don't want sectoral unions. You don't want like one union working for their workers, and then that impacts negatively some of the other workers. So what you want is a single union. Workers as a whole across the world. I'm sounding like a Marxist now, I guess, or a Trotskyist. But you want one union representing all workers, and really, when you think about it, what is that? It's just all the workers,
yeah,
and it's basically just called society.
yeah, exactly. Let me rephrase that.
Or
it's not the
government
intention.
by
It's,
the people.
it's not the intention of the union that bothers me. It's where the powers try
Yeah, yeah,
to be.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I'd agree.
Yeah.
Yeah. The
We've
old idea of trade unions for each particular trade and all that was had a time and a place in society,
yeah.
and they're trying to survive on that now, but they're not as effective as they need to be, and it's just the kind of concept that Richard Murphy and his folks kind of push is a bit out of date, I'd say. It's not that they're bad people or they want,
Yeah.
they want the right things. It's just
Correct.
it's just that I would say it's better if all the workers all unite, and and that's called government. That's called government by the people. That's your union.
Yep.
Your union
Yep.
is the government.
Yeah.
It's an ideal situation. It's just that we don't have it. Yeah, Charles. Yeah. MMT's not pro-union in a sense that you don't get agreement within MMT on unions, but certainly a lot of people still are pro-union for the right reason, and I just think MMT shows you that there's other ways of supporting workers, and it's from the government side. But yeah, I don't know. That's just our opinion here, and I'm certainly not. Whenever there's a unionist who's pro MMT, I'm like, that's great. Sarah Nelson, for example, and many others, they're fully on board with MMT, and a lot of them say the right things in terms of the just transition for the fossil fuel industry, coal industry workers, and that is that there's no way to get a just transition without supporting the workers. You can't just go and unemploy all the coal miners in Newcastle and just expect things are going to work out really well.
Let me jump in on that point though, and let me bring up what Thomas D was saying before. So he put what ought the functions of union be, and yeah, actually, Charles, you make the point I'm about to make. Employment guarantee makes unions obsolete. Yes, that is my biggest point.
Kind of.
And this is kind of where I go after the left.
The wait a minute, just for the wage it does.
For the wage, okay.
For workplace conditions, you still need labor agitation.
If the right gets the monetary system completely bass backwards, right? The left, I think, it's the employment situation bass backwards, and there is undoubtedly risk for people to get exploited in a capitalist system, right? For workers to get exploited in a capitalist system, right? But those risks can be mitigated at the government level. They don't have to be mitigated at the company level. You don't have to put in unions to mitigate the risks of being exploited, right? So the point I would make is that if there is anything that you would need union for protection from, you can actually get whatever that protection would be, you can get that just straight from government, right? Not getting paid enough, that's fine. Job guarantee, go get a minimum, whatever the floor wage is at the job guarantee, right? Just in general, if there are services that we need done, but no one wants to do them, and they're just not, going to get paid enough, whatever that might be. I know that's not exactly how the free market works, but whatever that might be, the government can just come in and get the wage to where it needs to be, right? And then why would you want your wage higher? Is it because you can't afford healthcare, you can't afford basics like groceries? Then the government can come in and supply those things, right? And it doesn't have to impose regulation on a corporation to do that. It can just do that itself. So the only union needed is a union for government employees. Yeah, maybe then, right? Maybe there would be a need for a safeguard, but
it's a little subtle of that because of realpolitik. Because unions did try to get into government. That's what the Labour Party was. It was attempt by workers to control government with a majoritarian sort of Labour Party, get rid of the Tories and all that sort of thing. It sort of never really worked because the Tories didn't really go away, and so you then make the case, we still need unions because we don't have Labour Party majoritarian type of stuff, and particularly these days we still need unions because the Labour parties have all gone neoliberal, so they're not supporting Labour, but the MMT steps in and like a goofball. Like Douglas and I, like saying, but we don't need the unions after all because the government can support Labour, with job guarantee, with benefits, with everything that Labour wants, the government can provide. It's just that the neoliberals don't, and so you still need today realpolitik. We still need a lot of Labour agitation because I don't see the oligarchs doing it for us.
Thomas, you point up. I mean, you bring up a good point. I don't necessarily, but again, I don't necessarily think this is unions need to provide this, but you would need. Let me reread what I'm actually reading here. Ideally, each for-money profit firm ought to provide a work site which is conducted. I mean, you'd want things like OSHA still in place, right? I mean, you'd want to ensure that you have
protections. It's not just about the wage; it's about all sorts of other protections.
The bigger point too that I would make, that I've made in the past, right? If you have a private sector, and again, we would come after someone that is kind of like a right-winger who uses the credit card analogy for the government spending with absolute derision, right? They should know better. And in my opinion, any sort of dunking on someone like that is completely justified, right? All I'm saying is I think the same sort of dunking and derision can also come after a lot of leftists who also make the same arguments, but from the leftist side. Not the same arguments of government spending, but the same arguments of trying to force corporations to do things that the government can absolutely do themselves without putting that regulation on the government or on the corporation. So for me, I get as upset when I see it from the left as when I see it from the right. Because I think it's to me it's anti-progress wherever I see it from. I know Bijou, you might have a little bit softer spot in your heart than I do.
I'm just concerned with the realpolitik in the situation today. So I agree with you in principle on what MMT can do, and that's how we should. That's how we should. What do you call it? Promote it or whatever. Get the right idea out there. And you should always, if you got nuance and time and people that are listening to you, not just talking past you, just mention the realpolitik as well and say, neoliberalism has really gutted unions and workers, and so there needs to be a building back of the whole purpose of a union. But do we do it the old way, or do we do it through a more decent society, decent government, more democracy? And sort of have the unions actually be, the workers actually be part of government, so we're not ruled by, this power elite, where our government is more of and by and for the people is ultimately, I think, the long arc of history. That's like, it's taken a while. It's taken us a while to get there. Probably not in my lifetime. But if anything, MMT tells you this is all possible. It's all possible, and so that's the narrative. You got to provide people with the narrative and the story about how MMT does make unions sort of obsolete, but in a very good way. It's like you've achieved and accomplished emancipation of the working class and elimination of the rentiers. But there's there's another thing that sort of comes up in this
Thomas, by the way, dude, you're bringing up some really good points.
Yeah, I appreciate all this. This is stirred up a few good comments. I noticed there's often now comments rather than questions.
Yeah. I mean, these are good points. An airline pilot's not going to say, he's just going to walk off the job. Yeah. Is he going to want a union to negotiate for his wages, though? I don't know. I mean, if he's a good pilot,
some of them do. It's interesting. Like
I don't know.
the airline stewards union, it's really been fascinating because they've had one airline. I forget which it is. I'm going to get it wrong, but like say, for instance, Delta or something.
Yeah.
I think I'm going to get it totally backwards, but one of them was negotiating and got higher wage demands, but then the other airline didn't. So it's not even like the unions there are acting, or actually maybe I'm getting it wrong. No, I'm getting it wrong. What happened is the employees of one of the airlines managed to get a good wage deal.
Okay.
But the air stewards union couldn't do it for all the other airlines.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's fine.
So that's again where if a union isn't really a union.
Yep.
It creates conflict between worker and worker conflict, which is really horrible to see. You want workers to be united.
No, you want workers out for the best interest.
When one sector or one big player in your industry has ununionized workers, then you really it's a messy realpolitik problem. It's really going to be quite hard. And then you get the ones who get the big wage rise, just saying, ha, I got mine. You guys should all work for us and quit your stupid unionized workplace and come work for us. But then again, MMT kind of steps in. Like, I don't know if you're aware, but Jeremy Corbyn in the UK had a really good, I mean, a lot of dopey sort of halfway neoliberal policies in terms of fiscal stuff, but he had a really good idea, which is that when a business or firm wants to sell their company, the workers get the first right to buy the company.
Okay.
And it's a really good way to encourage worker cooperatives to form. They get the money. The government loans them the money to buy the firm, and they don't have to pay it back until they're back to revenue generating.
Okay.
And so it's a really good way for small to medium companies to become worker owned, and then you basically solve the union problem because you've integrated management, workers, everyone's working together for common purpose within the company, but it's still in the private sector, so it's a worker cooperative. And
hold on a second.
It's supported by the state, but
if the government's going to issue the money, though, I mean, it's effectively a government company at that point, right?
The government doesn't own it. The government loans them the money to buy the company off the former business owners. And you can debate me with us about the semantics of that.
Okay.
But it's still a worker control company.
Okay.
I mean, if you want to be pedantic about it, every freaking company is government owned because they're all regulated by the laws of the land.
Yeah.
So, what is private, what is public? But this is government loaning the money. It's not, the government doesn't own the company. It's just the workers own the company, and then eventually they'll be running it themselves, and they'll pay off the government loan. I think that was the Corbyn plan. Anyway, I didn't read the fine print. It was a good idea, and it's a good alternative to having to have workers form unions because they're working under oppressive conditions for the capitalist class. So
oppressive
anyway,
conditions.
It didn't fly because of Brexit. Derailed everything. So it's all stuff to be done later.
Ken and Thomas, I'll definitely think this week through your thoughts. My initial thought is I'll think through some of the points you brought up and come up with something next time we bring it up. But the one thing I did want to finish on is Charles' point, which is that's the problem with government. Who regulates the government? And here's the point that I want to finish on, or at least wrap up with, regarding the Murphy article that we were just looking at, and bringing this all the way back to what we started on when you were finishing your last point. And I think the biggest misconception with what MMT is, and I think the biggest thing that MMT points out, or the most important thing MMT points out, and if I were to define MMT in, I guess, it would be 4 words or something like that, it would be ultimately that it's a policy decision. I think that's the best way to summarize what MMT is trying to point out. In particular, a lot of what Warren Mosler is trying to point out is that a lot of the things that get defined as just functions of laws of nature are really policy decisions. And that depending on what angle you view things from, it may look like this is just some sort of law of nature, that we're not going to have tax revenue for government to fund services for the public good, and so we need these banks to lend this stuff out, and that's how we're going to get the government to do this, right? But MMT correctly presenting how the monetary system actually works, functions, you can see, no, it's a policy decision. Can you fund government spending through only credit creation from banks? Yes, you could, right? That is a path. It is a policy decision you could make. It would have dire consequences, but it's a policy decision. Where do you want unemployment to be at? That is a policy decision. What do you want inflation to look like? That is a policy decision. Now, what policy decisions aren't, and is definitely part of the outworking of what would be kind of the laws, the natural laws of the economy, is how productive is the economy? What is the real output of the economy, right? I mean, that is up to the individual agents and to determine that. That part we an MMT perspective would agree on, but a lot of people will take that silo of that silo of what gets generated by just the outcome of the natural laws of the economy, and just lump so much into that and say, nope, this is all necessary stuff, that we end up getting in front of ourselves and reducing the opportunity we have to increase output, to be more productive, to increase the benefit that we could also get from the public side. So that is my point. It is
I think if you overdo it like Richard Murphy, you're going to get folks like you, Douglas, and Charles Grip in the chat, and everyone like that sort of on your case, which I think is probably fair. But I'm no history buff really, but if you look at the whole history of government in the broadest sense, go back to ancient times where you had formation out of just primitive tribes, villages, which were a form of government, and then Athenian sort of democracy. I'm going to skip a whole lot, obviously. I mean, you got Babylonian temple authorities, which were sort of religious forms of government, and Athenian democracy, the Roman Empire and all its goods and bads, and then the Magna Carta in Britain, and then the New World, America, and all that. You see the arc of history there, right? It's not a random process. It's humans want government, and so when you say, "Oh yeah, but who regulates the government?" It's a sort of a dopey question. We all regulate the government, right? Governments can and feudal lords don't get away with anything they want to get away with. They only get away with what the peasants will let them get away with, which could be a huge lot. It could be really bad. It could be a really bad situation for you if you're living under someone with a whole lot of military power like Putin or Biden or whoever it is. So you want to work away at reducing their unbridled power.
Yep.
Which, to be fair, a lot of it doesn't come from government. It comes from oligarchs and rich donors and people who hold the purse strings. And the military industrial complex is a huge amount. And now today Wall Street and Silicon Valley. So they are the regulators of government today. And that's the problem. The rest of us collectively, all us peasants, we're not an effective enough regulator of our own governments yet. And the neoliberal era is the problem. It hasn't helped this. And we've got to walk back neoliberalism to get a more MMT understanding of the public purpose, so that ordinary people have a much greater say in government. And you can criticize me, you can say, "Oh, tyranny of the majority," and I'm saying, hell yeah. What other tyranny do you want? It's just like, it doesn't make any sense to me to have a tyranny of the minority. So it's got to be a tyranny of the majority. It's got to be. Let me say something a little bit Marxist and inflammatory. Right? It has to be a dictatorship of the proletariat if we're going to get any justice, and that's the way it's going to go. And I think unions, probably not going to get us there. So it's got to be mass people educating each other, understanding things like MMT, understanding, the role of government and the role of the private sector, and ultimately it should all be working in harmony, not sort of antagonistically against each other. You understand where does the competition, where do these competition guys, where do they get it right? Where does competition work? Well, it's not everywhere, I'm afraid to say to you neo-Darwinists. Like, sometimes cooperation is a hell of a lot better. And human beings are an altruistic species. We're the most altruistic cooperative species on the planet. And, we also have competition because we like sport, and we have these sort of, ingrained evolutionary drives to compete and so forth as well. But we're the most cooperative species. And if you see that reflected in government, I don't think you see human nature correctly reflected in current governments. It's a distortion, and it emphasizes our competitive, antagonistic nature, and doesn't bring forth to the light a lot of our cooperative, altruistic nature yet. And I see freaking MMT as one understanding that allows you to see that. Also allows you to go and be a giant asshole and create war and famine and whatever but without MMT, I don't think you get to a just society. Let me put it that way. If it's a monetary economy.
I have two special guests right outside my office door right now.
Oh, really?
Saying
the
hi.
Cats or
saying
the
hi.
Douglasinas?
That's who. Yeah.
Douglas and Nino. Hello. Nice. Yeah.
Let's see. I like the bow you put on that part of the discussion.
Oh, good.
That's pretty good.
That's what I have you here for, to just nod in agreement with me, and every now and again fake some disagreement so that people don't get the idea that we're just alluding. Circle jerkers. Oh God.
We're almost at the third hour where we're allowed to go off the rail. I'm also looking at the notes you had, that you wanted to hit on. But this can give us. I can get 5 more minutes before we get to the third hour. If for some reason you're watching this, not for some reason. I mean, if you're watching this and you're new here, welcome. Hit subscribe, hit the like button, all that good stuff. But also, when we finally hit the third hour, we talk about whatever we want. Feel free to drop off at that point. It's where the fun really happens. When we hit the third hour, that's when we kind of let ourselves go. We're almost to the third hour. And there was one thing that I wanted to bring up before we close out that I meant to start off with at the outset, and that is maybe I'll save this for next week, because I know people kind of tune in to the first hour for more data-driven. I'll show it this weekend. I'll show it next week. How does that sound, everybody? Yeah. I'm gonna click switch over screens here. Big point I wanted to make is we continue to see massive acceleration in margin debt. Wanted to point that out. Margin debt continuing to reaccelerate here. After the fall off that it saw in 2022. Yeah. Really strong correlation between margin debt and stock prices, and we continue to see the cycle play out. One of the things too, with margin debt and I mean any debt creation that's most closely associated with asset prices is you see this like almost harmonic cycle of the actual level of margin debt that lasts, I don't know, 18 months or so. So I mean, you get the cyclical nature of the cycle, the cyclical nature of the cycle, the cyclical nature of the margin debt, acceleration, deceleration, and we're continuing to see it kind of take off here. So just to kind of add to the continued bullish case here, we're even seeing this track. This track on the margin debt side as well. But that was one of the final things I wanted to leave off with
good.
on the market.
Well, maybe also add that it goes with your previous recap as well.
Exactly. I meant to slide this in here.
And
there, yeah.
And another thing to add to that, I think that we forgot to mention is that a lot of the mainstream get another thing wrong. I mean, you're right; they get interest rates backwards, but they also probably often are not getting Minsky right. So the instability of capitalism is upwards. And that's what would put a bow on what I said earlier about, where is the recession actually going to come from in real terms? Because the governments know they can always bail out the financial sector, and they do, even if they're a bit late. But the true instability of capitalism is upwards, and so you get euphoria.
Yep.
And with everyone else being so bearish, where's this euphoria coming from?
Yeah, exactly.
So in a funny way, there's a kind of a psychological damper on the euphoria.
Yeah.
And so again, that just from an MMT lens, it says this could actually go on for quite a while without if there's no debt ceiling.
Yeah, if the debt ceiling.
These regressive conditions of a booming sort of economy, with the people at the bottom getting a really bad deal and the people at the top getting a massively great deal. After you've taken into account the regaging, and yes, some of the asset prices will drop whenever there's a raise hike. I'm getting I'm not making sense here.
I'm tracking.
My headache is cold is kicking in. But what I mean, the rate hike. Did I say the hike rate?
It's a tongue twister. Yeah. The rate hike cycle is a tongue twister warm up. I do now. I add that. Yeah. I add that to my tongue twister warm ups before I go live.
I wish more people would listen to us, because we're one of the few channels out there that are saying the rate hikes are a repeller. Well, I mean, actually, no, it's not fair. I do read that sometimes, and some of the other media that I consume, they do get it right.
I don't,
but not a lot of the time.
I've yet to see.
I don't see it a lot.
I've yet to see anyone besides myself or Mosler spell out, connect the dots. Here's how the rate hikes are going to actually create a more bullish environment for the financial side, right, like where the connection is. Some people might say, I don't actually think rate hikes will slow down the economy, et cetera, et cetera. But I've yet to find anyone who's on the exact same page. And and any critiques of the argument I've made don't make they haven't dissuaded me yet. So, or I'm sorry, dissuaded me from my point, persuaded me to their point.
Yeah. I mean, I think Stephanie and Nathan in Modern Money Network, even Bill Mitchell, are sort of in agreement, but they're sort of hedging a little bit. They do have a bit of a recessionary streak in some of their writing as well, and I think there are some signs. There are some signs that certainly, if you don't look at the macro and you look at the micro, you can find people who are really in pain.
Absolutely. Yep. How does the old saying go? If my neighbor loses their job, it's a recession. If I lose my job, it's a depression. Right. Yeah.
There you go.
A couple things too. I think, and it's very easy to fall in this trap, especially when you're an educator, more an educator and less someone who's just trying to do analysis of the macro environment, so you can use that analysis to make decisions off of, right? Versus an educator who's trying to explain something. It's if the problem is a lack of government spending on the public good, for the public good, then it makes sense to find at every corner an almost recession, right?
Mm.
Because it can be solved, right? The problem can be solved. If there's an almost recession, then I've got the solution for it, and vice versa, right? If your problem is that too much government spending creates distorts the price signal, right? Then you can always find too much government spending is distorting the price signal, and that's why markets are right. On the verge of a recession, and my point being is the fear sells, and it works in both directions. Whereas someone who's just trying to effectively guess which way the market's going to go tomorrow can be a little less agnostic on necessarily selling fear, right? I mean, in theory, their track record is what should, is why you should listen to them if they have a track record that matches to some sort of logical explanation of how they got to the decision they made in the first place. Whereas,
less agnostic,
say that again,
or more agnostic. They could be more agnostic about. Sorry, I was just trying to follow the logic there.
What did I say?
I think you said they could afford to be less agnostic.
I'm sorry, less agnostic to the
agnostic is. I was thinking they don't care about the fear. I mean, I wasn't sure.
Oh, yeah, they can be less agnostic to having a team. I'm sorry, they can be the trader can be less agnostic to having to being on the right team, right? They don't. I think that's the argument.
It could be more agnostic.
You're right. They can be more agnostic. Yeah, okay.
That was all.
That
was all.
Okay.
That was all.
I get what I'm doing. Thank you. Yeah. Okay, you were tripping me up. Yeah.
No, I think I understood what you meant.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Ken's got it right too. Yeah, Ken's got it right. God, I don't even know where I was going now. But nevertheless,
we're going to the third half.
Yeah.
Don't worry.
We're about to cross the finish line in 2 minutes, so they should be more agnostic. Yes. We made it to the third hour. Not quite, but
third half. Yes.
The third half. Yes.
I've been a bit under the weather, so I didn't have a lot of cool, interesting stuff to talk about. But one thing, our highly educated chat here could.
Can I share your tablet? Is that all right?
Oh yeah, I guess you could.
Okay.
Yeah, I guess you could.
Yeah,
right. I'm not sure I've got anything profound on there. I could maybe wipe the first one off. I had the first point up for a few weeks. Actually,
a couple weeks now. Yeah.
To it. New Zealand actually apparently. In fact, it's been so long I've had this bullet point up that I forget what it was about. But New Zealand did encounter a mini debt ceiling. So our local governments have been budget constrained for no good reason, and so they're hitting their quote unquote local government debt ceilings. Just wanted to point that out. Again, stupid things don't need to happen. We've got all the resources to go and do whatever our local governments want to do, light rail, city beautification.
Yep.
Build a bit, and then they're just still saying, "Well, we've run out of money." Yeah. Okay, that's one thing. The second one there about
I like this one.
Reading the tea leaves.
Yeah.
Now this actually may have belonged in the earlier half
out of the gate.
It's not so much fun, but okay. So the gist of this is that I'm following along. I'm not a Twitter devotee or fan or anything. I don't follow it along closely, but every now and again I try to just inject a bit of lunacy and a little bit of fun, doing a bit of dunking.
Yeah.
And so these people coming on and complaining to Warren that he's always too optimistic and all that. And it's did they listen to our interview with him? Where he's like, yeah, but this is the most aggressive way to do things.
Yes.
It's like it's Twitter, guys. You don't write all the nuance on Twitter.
Yep.
Yeah, and sometimes I do try, but but you got to look at Warren's whole record, and it just annoyed me a little bit that people were sort of griping at him for being too optimistic or too bullish. was it Ken also in the chat earlier today mentioned that Mike Norman was had a little similar interaction with Warren a few years ago.
So this is interesting.
I don't know what that was about.
But
to me, go ahead.
Yeah, you're fine. Finish that. I'll give you the replay, the recap of what happened with.
Okay. You give me the recap in a second. I'll try to knock this one out pretty quickly. So the point is that what's the discourse going to be from MMTers? Yep. Okay, we're not very united, but if you understand MMT, you can't help but being pretty well united with other MMTers, because we're thinking macro. We've got all sorts of different ideas on the micro. And but in the macro, we're all pretty united because of the MMT kind of has that effect. It's like you're all pretty much in agreement on quite a lot of fundamentals. And so what's the discourse going to be? Is it going to be that we're going to be saying, look, hey, there's not really a strong recessionary signal yet, and here is why. And so you're going to sound like a bit of a bull, right? And everyone wants you to be a bear because they want you to say, yeah, but the interest rates are regressive. But we've already said that. Do we have to keep repeating it? So this is what I was thinking about. It's like, so reading the tea leaves ahead, what's going to happen 6 to 12 to 20, 18 months down the track when maybe there is a recession? They're going to come and attack MMT for printing too much money, right? You're going to come and attack us for MMT for sort of pausing everything when this is not the case at all. Or no one in the government's really acting with an MMT lens. So they're getting things, all backwards. And so it's really important, I think, what Warren is doing to just lay down all this, tar seal on the road so that you can go back and drive over it and say, look, we were telling you how things would be, and we're trying to tell an accurate story. And if that story happened to be that the economy was going to keep going pretty strong because of fiscal, then we weren't lying. That we were telling the story straight. And so you got to be careful now about when you kind of start to talk about predicting recessions and so forth. You got to be very careful about it. And I think Douglas is exactly the right thing on this attitude, is that it's really the debt ceiling, and other than that, it's regressive. Okay, yes, it's highly regressive the way the economy's going along, but it's not MMT causing the inflation in that sense. It's just the other policies. So anyway, I've been thinking about this. I don't think I've got that all out right because my head's a bit clouded. No. But if you've got anything to add, and go ahead. And if you've got a little bit of take on Ken's thing about what Warren did, if it's interesting, I don't know. What do you think?
A couple things. I don't know who this Fruitcake 298 is, but welcome. He's already cracked, or he or she has already cracked the algorithm to find out how to get highlighted.
What's that all about?
This Doug guy is kind of sexy. And then apparently being outed as my burner account, which I do have. I mean, we all have a few burner accounts. I do have a Twitter. Great, man. I do have a Twitter. I do have a Twitter or a YouTube burner account that I do use, but that is not the account. Speaking of which, speaking of burner accounts, I am curious. I've thought about. Well, I'll get into this later. I want to answer your question. Why am I red right now? I'm not red. My complexion has stayed the same. Let's see. Going back to your point, I'll derail things in just a second. We'll go back off the rails. I want to go back to your point because what is MMT? I have a guess at who Fruitcake 298 is. I'm curious if they're Canadian. And that's why they love the sound of my Michigan voice that is effectively Canadian. You'll never know. Well, I'm about to find out. Okay. What could MMT be wrong about? Okay, let me. It'd be so great, Josh. It's Warren Mosler. Welcome aboard, Warren Mosler.
Oh, you're getting a ban for that.
Yeah,
ban people.
yeah.
Oh, I can. Watch out.
Okay.
Sorry.
I'm gonna go back and I'm gonna start and retell the story. My understanding of Mike Norman's beef with Warren. Warren was very bullish. Not very bullish. Warren just thought there wasn't enough government spending from about 2012, 13 through 2018, 2019, right? And he effectively said we were teetering on a recession at any given time during that. And Norman was saying, no, fiscal spending is strong enough. That seemed to be the contention between the two of them, right?
Right.
Not contention. I mean, Warren was never responding to Mike Norman to begin with, but Warren was just simply, or Mike Norman was just simply saying, no, stocks should still continue to go up. There's fiscal spending here. It's enough to support. That was kind of the contention. To your point, though, what might MMT be wrong? Get wrong about? I heard Mike Norman is jealous of Doug. We're in the street. Yeah. Speaking of which, Mike Norman put out a tweet. Hey, who should I have on my podcast? Right. If you go through the responses to who he should have on his podcast, my name came up the most by far. Right. I mean, it came up multiple times. Lots of likes. The most liked were all. Bring on Douglas. Bring it. Which I appreciate. Everyone who clicked the heart button on that and mentioned my name was great. I love to talk to Mike Norman. Obviously, from his perspective, we effectively have the same service that we sell, so I can understand why he would want to say someone who sells it for cheaper. Why don't you have him on? Which I would love to just talk to him, just to pick his brain and was he in Vicious Attack? Ken, if you can send the videos, I'd be interested to see that. But anyway, going back to what MMT could be wrong 6 months about, and from now, and kind of making too big of an MMT claim. I get your fear, and I do think one of the things I'll admit no one had on their radar that could have caused a bit more chaos is this idea that if banks would have been more exposed to long dated treasuries, right? And that seemed to end up being a bit of a risk. I mean, obviously we know it's a policy decision for it to to turn into chaos, right? But I think it was not something that was on my radar, and I think that's something that you need to be careful of. That there can be unintended consequences that you don't fully understand for any policy decision that's being made, right? Because there are various actors that are trying to take advantage of policy decisions that you would never guess would be happening, that can create some effects that could lead to chaos down the line. And then given the Great Financial Crisis is a great example of this, right? Packaging up the mortgages and putting one putting one or two that might have been a little bit closer to default than anticipated into some sort of package, and then all of a sudden you get a situation where the government spending, the fiscal pump just gives way, and you end up with a crisis. So I would say that is where, at least as maybe small voice in the MMT world, where I would need to be careful to say, we will never get a recession. There's no way a recession can happen. Yeah, look, interest rates regauge things, no doubt about that. And there could be risk, there could be cracks that we just don't fully understand yet because there's no way to see them. Right. A great example of that was SVB. Now, as it turns out, we did get a recession because of it, in part because the economy is just so damn hot because of the strong flow, in part, or being supported in part because of that higher interest rate that's being paid out. So
there's also a narrative, I think. I'm not sure how much Warren emphasizes it, but he's one of the only ones that's really that good on it. Maybe Nathan Tanks as well. Which is that if the Fed takes their foot off the accelerator too suddenly,
yeah. I think that's a realistic problem. I think it's,
So
I
anyway,
will.
it's good to get all that out, get ahead of that discourse, because I can just see another cycle, another whole 2 or 3 years of like policymakers, politicians, and that just getting all in nerves about MMT again.
Yeah,
And it's like
yeah,
because all the rest of the public discourse is MMT was wrong, ha.
yeah, yeah.
And that could just set us back quite a ways, even though a lot of the politicians seem to have understood it now and just scared to say. So that's a problem, because psychological pressure, they're not just beholden to their rich donors. They still need to scramble together votes
to get the votes. Yeah, they still have to get 51%. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. The other thing is, okay, this is slightly more in the third half. Is I'm always I'm always sort of looking for these interesting creative analogies and things that are totally really unscientific, more poetic, and I like to sometimes base some of my writing off this, because I think there's a space. I don't imagine anyone reads what I write, but it's there, and you can copy it and republish it if you want. Put your own spin on things that I've got. It's all free Libre. I don't copyright it or anything. So it's copyrighted, GNU free license. So. But I try to write on my blogs. So I've got a physics blog, topological 4G on theory unchained, and I've got my macroeconomics, I hung up high. And if I was sort of onto it, or if I had the time, I'd probably do something in philosophy of mind as well, and do the AI stuff, debates. But I sort of weave that in a little bit. So I sometimes write an article about AI and things like that. But yeah, one thing I like to do is not write like Stephanie or Nathan or whoever, but write more whimsically, kind of for fun, have fun with it. I have no idea if it's actually funny, but I tell you what though, I can't listen to myself talk. It's so cringe, but I don't mind reading myself. I actually find going and editing my stuff to be quite pleasurable. So when I write text, I read my own text back. Do you know what happens? I have the accent of Richard Feynman, and so it's really awesome. And so I really want to try and maintain that complete illusion and delusion for as long as possible. So that's why I sort of write as I read it back in my head as if it's Richard Feynman talking to me, and it all works out, and it's all really good. So one thing, I don't know if the chat can let me know what they think, but I'm always looking for things. And one of the things is analogies with physics of duality. So I don't know if the chat knows this, but I'll give you a real quick little modern physics primer. So the current ideas in like quantum gravity, which is the holy grail of theoretical physics, is to unite or bring together, if you like, gravitation with quantum mechanics. The new idea is that our universe is sort of like a hologram. So it's got this bulk space-time in the middle, which is all gravity, and on the boundary it's all quantum mechanics, no gravity, don't have gravity on the boundary. And there's this model for this called anti-de Sitter space conformal field theory that works really well. They've proven that not rigorously, but they've shown that there are these dualities, but it doesn't work for our universe because we live in a expanding universe thanks to dark energy cosmological constant. So our universe is actually expanding, right? And it's got no boundary, so it doesn't work. So there's no holography for our actual universe. So there's something else though. There's some other duality between quantum mechanics and gravity that people reckon. I reckon MMT has this. I reckon MMT has like the key duality is credit and debt, right? That's all the people who want to base money on sort of some positive money or gold or whatever. They're always forgetting that fundamentally what money is, at least for MMT is. I know other people can define. You can define money however you like, but as we see it, as it looks like in history and practice and operational terms, all money is credit, and all credit has an equal amount of debt, and you can do it both ways. So anyway, yeah, so that's the sort of thing that I kind of think about from time to time when I'm not doing any technical work. Is things like poetic dualities and analogies and ways to creatively write, so that you know, I don't want just the finance bros and the mainstream econ people to understand MMT. I want the poets to understand MMT as well. Oh yeah,
I'm convinced.
yeah, cool. Oh, awesome. That's all I need. Yeah, Feynman. Yeah, I often wonder what his politics were. I think he probably didn't care too much. But, yeah, I think he was progressive, if you like. But but Lenny Susskind is a guy that I like. He's a good sort of lefty. Probably not MMT aware, but another one was another good physicist that had good politics, sort of, was the smartest man in the universe. Have you ever heard of Edward Witten? Ed Witten, the string theory guy?
No.
You've heard of superstring? Have you heard of superstring theory?
Yeah.
That was the sort of biggest sort of game in town for quantum gravity for a long time. Probably really still is.
Okay.
But that's actually, this holographic principle emerged out of thinking about superstrings, but then it decided it didn't really need superstrings too much. Edward Witten is like this. He's a funny guy to listen to. He has a very high-pitched, sort of effeminate voice, and he's got this sort of big sort of egg head as well. He looks like this sort of genius scientist, but he sort of is. He's just incredibly smart. But the other day, I was listening to an interview with Witten, and he sort of mentioned that he doesn't do all sorts of research, and he doesn't cover a broad field. He just picks a little problem and just works away at it. And so, a lot of these really smart geniuses, they don't have an enormous outsized intellect compared to the rest of us. They just sort of have very narrow interests sometimes, but sometimes they just have some incredible talent for picking things out of the platonic realm and putting them into the actual physical context. Yeah. And he's really damn good at that. It means he's basically using physical ideas, invented a whole lot of new mathematics that mathematicians were just completely unaware of. So he's an amazing guy, but but he also had some interesting politics. He was initially started off as a historian and was really into politics. And I think you guys know about this guy George McGovern, right?
A little before my time, but I'm aware of who he is.
Before your time.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was considered in his day to be quite a progressive guy, and so he was the Democratic nominee. I think was it against Nixon? You guys, I think it was Nixon. He lost pretty badly.
He did, yeah.
And because he lost, this guy Ed Witten, young student, historian, he went into physics because he got disillusioned with the party. Thanks to that, we got this amazing physicist who's he's still actually interesting. He can be seen, I think, on Twitter or elsewhere, advocating for Palestinian rights in the Middle East and peace in the Middle East. So he's one of these people who hasn't given up on peace in the Middle East. I have to say, my father was very close to working with people in the Middle East and the Israelis and that on the pro-peace side. So it's all sort of really tragically sort of all caved in recent years, I think. But yeah, interesting guy, Ed Witten.
It does look like he's on Twitter.
Yeah. And he comes in. The other physicists who know him like what's he on about here? Because he sounds a bit radical. He'd get accused. Obviously he's Jewish, but he's one of those ones that would get accused of being anti-Semitic or whatever because he's like pro-Palestinian.
Oh yeah.
All that sort of insanity. It's pretty strange. Yeah, I don't know much about McGovern, but actually the first way I learned about McGovern and all that sort of interesting US history was from Ed Whitten, and learning about Ed's history and how he got into physics because his politics failed thanks to Nixon. All these unintended consequences. Anything coming up in the chat? Because I think oh yeah. So that was Susskind, right? So I've got the physics blog. You can go and read that if you ever want a bit of an interesting take on the MMT that's a bit strange or a bit whimsical, but also the physics that I do. It's also serious as well. So whenever I get free time, I'll try and put in some work on the theoretical physics rather than just the sort of philosophical side and the sort of fun side of it. I do find the fun side really interesting. But what I want to do, you don't have to do it right now, Douglas, is I wanted you to demonstrate this.
I saw this
principle.
Oh, God. Okay.
Yeah. The Aharonov-Susskind hand wave, or Aharonov-Bohm or Bohm-Susskind hand wave.
Okay.
Because it's interesting. I came across this is all just me.
Can I Google this? Can I Google this, or do I need to hold on? Can I Google this, or do I need to do it?
You can do a quick Google while I'm looking to the chat.
Okay.
This is all just me, shamelessly self-promoting my blogs and things, just because it's fun. And so what I'll say is I wrote a little bit about one of Suskind's lectures, and he actually gets some things he doesn't understand that I think I understand that he doesn't. Or even Ed Whitten. I think there are some things that I understand that Ed Whitten doesn't. I mean, I don't really know that I've got things right. But in a Platonic sense, it's like I think there is a possible universe where some of my theory might actually work. And I think there's a very slim chance that maybe our actual universe also maybe operates a little bit the way that I've been speculating and theorizing about. But one of them is interesting, is the spin of the fermions. The spin of the electrons and quarks is spin 1/2. And the weird thing about that people think is all quantum mechanical, is that you have to spin an electron or a quark, you have to spin it around 720 degrees. Is that right? Is that 2? You have to go twice around the circle, 4 pi radians. So once around is 2 pi, right? So twice around is 4 pi. So you have to spin an electron or rotate it 4 pi, 720 degrees to get it back to the beginning. If you only rotate the thing around 360 degrees, it gets a minus sign.
Okay.
So it's not the same electron or photon. At least its wave function is not the same. Yeah. So people think this is just wholly weird. It's like everything physical. If it's physical, if it's to do with space time, you rotate it around 360 degrees, you're back to where you began. For everything, right? Everything. And so they're thinking that quarks and electrons have to be super weird stuff. It's all quantum mechanical and mysterious. But in my blog, Topological 4G on Theory Unchanged, or T4GU, I explain all this, and it's completely classical physics. But it's pretty hilarious the way it works out. But anyway, so Susskind is doing this trick. He's demonstrating how actually, there is sort of a physical proof that you can rotate something around 360 degrees. It's not the same. But if you keep on going around to 720 degrees, it is the same. So at some point in time, I'll let you practice if you want to. But if you've got a cup of coffee or water there, glass of water,
okay,
that's like fairly full.
Okay.
Oh, that's not good. You have to slice the top off it. There's got to be some risk involved.
Okay.
I wonder if I could turn on my camera and do it myself.
Okay. Well, I'll tell you this much: water and risk around my my supercomputer is not gonna.
Yeah, but I thought we're in the third half already. So if you fritz your computer, it's just it's okay. We can rejoin next week.
Yeah, the discussion I had with my wife a year and a half ago when I was building this thing that I was going to spend about $4,000 on a PC was not the easiest discussion to have. I don't think I can have that discussion with her again.
Oh man. Okay.
Yeah. So we're gonna keep the water away from. But tell me what the
Yeah. So you do this trick. It's a really good one. I've done it with my students, and And yeah, I used to do a few of these little lecture tricks. I'm not the greatest for this. I'm not like a what's his name, Richard Lewin. There's a physics guy at MIT who does really cool tricks all the time in the class. He's really good. I just pull out one or two on occasion to do.
So what am I doing with my cup though? What am I doing with my cup?
Yeah.
What's my hand?
While I'm riveting on here, I'm thinking of how to maybe turn on my videos so that I could maybe do it. Although I'm not decent, I'm totally naked or something like that.
I have a cup now that doesn't. There we go. Wow, this is
all right. Okay. Actually, if you can put my camera on, give me a minute. I'll go and fill it up with water.
Okay.
I could use a new keyboard, right? Hang on, I'll be back in a second.
For Chad, this is the first time that I've actually ever seen Bijou, and he's living in a forest over here. So
this could get really dicey because
so
I have to.
We're joking that you just walked into the forest to go get your cup of.
Yeah. I'm not sure if this is gonna to see it on thing, but I decided to take your cautious approach and only like half fill the cup. Can you see?
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, we got half a cup of water.
I used to have Shrek, but he got killed.
Okay, Fiona, Princess Fiona cup.
Yeah. So I'm going to rotate this thing around without moving my feet. No tricks. So if you blink too long, you might think I've fooled you, but just try not to blink.
Yep.
Try not to blink too long.
Yep.
Okay, so I'm going to rotate it around 360 degrees, and it's not going to come back to the same. Not going to come back in the same way. And I'm trying to. Sorry. Okay, so you see that? I'm trying to get it on camera. Right. There you go. Back to Fiona. Right. I've gone around. I'll do it in reverse. It's losing it.
Yeah, we get the gist. Yeah.
So there you go. Whoa. Right. Now, without moving my feet, but I sort of have to crouch down because I have to keep it in the camera shot. If you do it in
you're
class,
spilling the water. No.
Yeah.
Oh,
if
no.
you do it in class, you don't have to do this.
Oh,
you don't have to squat down. I have to keep it on camera. There you go. I did it. I'll do it again. So around like that. This time I'm going to sort of grip it with my fingers a little bit, so it's a bit safer. So I spin around like that, and keep on going around. It's now, 720 degrees. Yeah. Now I'm wet. Okay, that's all. I don't know why I had the urge to just demo that. I guess I'm missing doing lecturing. I'm not sure.
I'm trying to piece this all together.
It's just to say I poetically relate it to MMT because in physics, right? Everyone thinks, the whole mainstream thinks that what do they think? They think electrons and quarks are weird. But what Susskind does is in his lecture, he shows that it's not so weird. But then he hasn't actually understood the full gist of it, is that because then he still goes back to electrons and quarks and say, they're actually weird because nothing when you rotate it around 360 degrees doesn't come back to itself. So how come the electrons and quarks have to be rotated around 4 pi? Yeah. So the answer is explained on my blog, and it's all classical physics. It's like the electron wave function and the quark wave function, they're not actually physical things. They're just instructions for what you do to a measurement instrument to take a measurement. And so how does that relate to MMT? I don't know, man. It's just interesting that you can still find in theoretical physics, right, which is probably our most well understood area of science. It's the hardest science in terms of being hard, like concrete, right? Like it's well understood.
Yeah.
More than any other science. It's still things that like the top experts sort of I think don't understand. But it remains to be seen whether I'm right and they're wrong. But if you read my blog, you'll see that I'm right about that. That the spin one half, the weird quantum nature of quarks and electrons in terms of their rotational symmetry is not weird at all. It's just classical rotational motion, and it's described by these geometric Clifford algebra is the way to do it. And yeah, you can get that all on my blog if you like, if you're interested in all that stuff. And it sort of relates to MMT because it's counter to a sort of paradigm in a way.
Yeah, yeah.
Although mine is even more related to MMT. I'll tell you this. I assume a lot of our chat is aware of the history of MMT, right? That it inherits from, way back. There's Marxist MMTers, the physiocrats from Steve Keen, concentrating on the real resources. And there's the Francois Quinet, and, goes through Keynes, Minsky, and all that. So there's a big history of MMT. And if you talk to, Michael Hudson and Randy Ray, it goes back to almost the dawn of writing. The very first writing on cuneiform tablets was probably records of account, records of credit and debt. So in a sense, MMT is counter the mainstream paradigm, but in another sense, it's ancient. It's the most ancient type of description of monetary economics. And so MMT has been correct for over 4,000 years. And so what that relates to my physics is that, so all this new holography and what Lenny Susskind is doing is really, really awesome stuff. And they're realizing that wormholes actually may exist at the subatomic scale, at the Planck scale. But then it says, what I'm saying is that actually I'm more in line with Albert Einstein. He was actually correct about a lot of things. You can get quantum mechanics out of gravity. You don't need to actually add any new special ingredients at all. It's all there in classical physics. But the difference is, like the MMT shift, the thing that Warren Mosley got right, that changed things, was understanding central bank monetary operations and so forth, and that the tax is designed to create unemployment in the first place. To go back to our earlier discussion, all that sort of stuff that sounds very strange to people's ears is like what I'm saying is that quantum mechanics isn't actually so weird when you really think about it. It's actually already existed in gravity. What Einstein did not understand. So he'd be like my John Maynard Keynes for physics. So he almost got it right, but what he didn't understand is there could be wormhole type topologies. So I find this fascinating. I'm aware that it's all totally poetic the way I relate my physics and my macroeconomics, but I also really love it that it's like the lowest scale of nature, the most sort of fundamental laws of physics that I could get concerned about, and then the highly macro level, which I think Roger Penrose has well described it, that the human mind is like probably the most complicated thing in the universe. Even though we're these tiny creatures on this little planet, we're probably the most complicated thing in the whole universe. If you go to a larger scale, gravity dominates, and you don't get anything more interesting until you get to black holes or stars, galaxies, black holes. It's all interesting, but they're quite simple phenomenon. Yeah, black holes being perhaps the most simplest. All right, so just evaporating off here, cooling down. Yeah, show your kids.
Oh my god, it was fun.
Anything else coming up in the chat?
We're having tons of fun in chat right now. They're having tons of fun in chat.
Yeah.
I have quite the group of admirers out there, and I appreciate it. I'm learning that. I'm learning that right now.
That's always good to know.
I had a couple thoughts along the way. I didn't write any of them down. Because yeah, if I Fred, yeah, it's in the closet. No Fred jacket tonight. Not quite cold enough for the Fred pullover.
You're heading into summer.
We are heading into summer. This will probably be the last time. Hopefully, the last time I do a pullover. Who's Fred? My first thought is Yakir A. Haranov.
Yeah. Yeah, kind of the interesting effect.
What was his part in your cup
Right.
twist?
Yeah, it's really interesting actually. It might be a little bit hard to explain it. I'm gonna put my pen on here. Go to the tablet.
Thomas, I hope you're right. Yeah, Fred, you've never seen my Fred merch?
Sexy stuff.
I might have to Bijou
on the boardwalk.
Your tablet's not all right. Your tablet's not.
That's all right. It might take me a while to draw it. It's a classic.
Will you do that? I'm gonna.
Yeah, it's a classic two-slit experiment where you could fire off some. Actually, probably electrons. I want to say, not photons. You have a source of electrons coming out of here, and you stick them through two slits to generate an interference pattern. There's actually a number of ways of doing the experiment. This is a slightly different way, but you can like stick a magnetic field here, one here and one here. So that's like a solenoid. That looks like that, and it's got a north and a south pole, whatever. Like this. So I'm just looking down on it from this direction here, and hopefully that explains it. People who don't go to physics lectures won't have a clue what I'm doing. But suppose these are two magnets that are in blue there, and you send the electrons through the screen, and then you detect the electrons over here. Sorry. And what Yakir Aronov said, he said that you'll get no interference pattern. You'll just get some spottiness of electrons here and here from going through the two slits. Sorry, no. What am I saying? He said you'll get interference. Interference between the two electrons from each slit, because nature doesn't know whether you've gone through slit 1 or slit 2, and so if you plot the interference pattern, you just get fringes like this. This is really bad. It's just detect. You get a bright spot here, a bright spot here, a bright spot here.
Yep.
Bright spot here, bright spot here. Yeah. So then you turn off one of these things, and turn this off and keep the other one on, and then the interference pattern goes away. You just get a bunch of stuff here and a bunch of stuff here from the second slit. Bit of overlap. So you lost the interference. How come? All you did is turn off one of the electric fields, and magnetic fields.
Yep.
And so the idea is that Aharonov, he said you can do this in another way. You can get a superconductor, stick the magnetic field in that, so that shields it. So there's no magnetic field leaking out of the superconductor.
Okay.
All contained within this toroidal thing. The actual experiment, you make a toroidal magnet like that, and then send the electrons in one, and then around the other way as well, like that. And when you do send the electrons through there, if you turn on the magnetic field, you can get. It's not actually a difference in. It's not actually an interference and then no interference. What actually you get is it shifts depending on the amount of magnetic field you've got. It shifts the interference pattern. Like from that, you could shift it as much as you like. You shift it a little bit, like it shifts around.
Okay.
So if if you like shift it just the right amount, you can make it clear that there's been a shift by shifting it like 180 degrees. See, so you can clearly shift the magnetic field. And the weird thing about that, right, is that there's only magnetic field in the cylinder here, but the electrons never go through the magnetic field. So how do they know which, whether they went through the middle of the donut or around the outside? So Aharonov sort of explained that. He said, the electrons have to, the magnetic field is not fundamental. It's the magnetic potential. So just the potential for there to be a magnetic field somewhere has an actual influence. So coming back to this situation here, what I'm saying is that you could actually make it so the electrons never go anywhere near the magnetic field, so they can just go straight past it, say. And yet they still know somewhere else in space and time there's a magnetic field. So again, it seems very deeply quantum mechanical, and I won't explain how that relates to the glass trick of rotating the glass around, but it is actually weirdly enough, it is actually related to that.
Okay.
Like,
I see the connection.
There's no connection. Don't lie. It's so hard to describe it, but it is actually using the same trick that you can rotate things around by 2 pi instead of by 4 pi instead of 2 pi. It's actually a kind of related thing to do with the topology of space and time, but it's a bit involved. So I have to leave you dangling there to wondering about how the heck the universe works. But I think the reason I call it the Aharonov-Susskind hand wave is because in his lecture, Susskind mentions Aharonov, not David Bohm.
Okay.
And so when Susskind does this, he cracks a really good joke. It's so funny. He says, I think some kid in the class goes, so isn't that a bit hand waving? And Suskind's like, yeah, but I rigorously proved it using hand waving.
Nice. Yeah.
Literally waved his hand around. It's actually really funny because in a way, I was thinking, actually in a way, he's right. He rigorously proved that rotations have this property, spatial rotations have this property where you can move a thing around 360 degrees and you don't get back to the identity. And his moving his hands around like I just did with my glass, I don't know, man. To me that is a rigorous proof. So it's the first hand waving proof that is actually rigorous that I've ever come across.
Okay.
In history. Yeah, I believe it's the first. All good fun.
Right on.
So keep an eye and ear out for anything like that in MMT that you think comes up. When I tell you this, right? So whenever anyone says something a little bit silly in economics, and you think there's an opportunity to make a good joke about it, out of it, let me know because I could probably come up with some sort of poetic mash between that and my physics. And,
nice.
It's always good fun to write about. Again, I'm not probably writing for you guys in the chat. It's more for the poets and the there's a whole culture of people out there who really are interested in theoretical physics for I don't know what reason, but they're interested in it, right? New Age types or whoever, and they just get a buzz out of watching theoretical physics stuff. So maybe actually, if we can get the Dougbot stuff going, and then free up a bit of time later on, maybe I should look into doing like physics lectures online.
Oh,
but the crazy type, fun type, all this kind of stuff. Because all you have to do is like put it out there, and people are like, wow, that's so deep and amazing. But all I'm doing is trying to explain things, but in a way that ordinary people can understand. Hopefully, it's a bit hard to do on the MMT live stream here. Don't have enough time, but yeah, a retirement project maybe. I don't know.
Jesus.
Yeah,
the chat's going
I'm
off
running out of voice now, man.
The chat's going off the rail, so.
Oh, that's fine. I don't mind.
It's completely off the rail now.
You could do a formal mathematical proof as long as you got a bow tie on. That's right.
Actually, the reason that God, you've said his name 4 or 5 times now. Aharonov. Jumped to my attention is his Wikipedia picture has him in front of a chessboard. He's got a clock out. He's clearly in a chess position, but there's no one playing against him. I don't know.
What?
Yes, it's I always get intrigued with set up chessboards and pictures to try and figure out what the actual chess position is.
Oh yeah, because you're a bit of a chess file.
Yeah. And I don't know. It's I'm okay with the picture here, right? But who the hell is he playing? I mean,
what's he smoking?
Yeah. He's got a. What is of interest? What I do appreciate here, though, in this picture is this is an actual. I mean, this is the same chess set that I have for my kids, right? It's a real tournament chessboard, green squares, the right way to go.
Yeah.
These are clearly weighted pieces. You can't. Who's playing on the other side of this lamp? I mean, is he playing the lamp?
Oh man, but this is staged.
I don't know.
He's posing.
But I do appreciate.
You look at the books in the background.
I do.
All these old ass sort of leather bound books.
And you want to know what grinds my gears? And I make sure my kids don't do this to me too. You want to know what grinds my gears? Look at how close the chess clock is to him. Are you kidding me?
Okay.
Are you kidding? My kids move the chess.
What's wrong with that?
It's got to be evenly in the middle of the table if he's going to play against someone on the other side. Yeah, you can't. Is
that a metaphysical law of nature?
Yeah, you can't move the chess clock closer to yourself. What? That's
why not?
Because then I got to reach further for it. And I might knock over a piece or something like that. Yeah, waste my time.
Yeah. Right. I forgot. Yeah, chess is a very physical sport.
Very. Yeah, it is. Hitting that chess clock, man.
I forgot about that.
Although I'll give him this. This is a real chess position set up. I mean, I can tell that he's developed some pieces. Yeah. He has a chess opening here. So
right. Well, I'd expect that to be. He is a bit of a mathematician. So
every picture of a chessboard you ever see in popular media, there's no way that it's an actual.
There's no way it could have ever gotten that.
It's but this is
impossible situation.
This is a
violation of the.
Hold on.
I believe that's the same with Go as well. There are some positions that you just wouldn't ever get.
You would never end up in.
Yeah, because it just wouldn't be an actual game. Unless you had someone who didn't understand the game.
Yeah, I think it's a lamp in the foreground. I know he's playing against a lamp.
Oh, he's playing against a lamp. Yeah.
Maybe it's an AI chess lamp.
Staged.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, no, it's some photo. You know what the photographers are like, right?
Oh yeah.
They come in, right?
Yeah.
And this is probably for some, wherever he is, Tel Aviv University.
Yeah. We got to
come in and they mess things up. It's like totally unnatural.
What's unfortunate is he clearly is a chess player because he's got an actual chessboard that you'd really play on, right? As opposed to like some ornate wooden board.
Exactly. Right.
And then they're like, yeah, and your opponent's gonna be a lamp. And he's probably like, you're just.
Well, it's easy to win that way.
You're just making me look like an ass, not a chess player.
Maybe he just likes winning.
We're reaching the end of. I guess I could be a lamp. Yeah, that's why I play my kids. So I do play my kids.
I love that pipe he's smoking.
Yeah. That looks. I mean, from what I can tell, there's a little tobacco in there. He's got a little something.
Yeah. He's a pretty smart guy. That guy.
Oh my God, Thomas is. His opponent is enlightened. That's really good.
Yeah. Nice.
Anyway, we've made it almost 3 whole hours. This is I said it at the outset of tonight's live stream. The ones where that we plan the least for end up being the best. And this one,
if you plan for MMT, you can get a bit nerdy, economics. But I believe with all your little experiments and all that, if you get them onto the dashboard and that, there's lots of good nerdy stuff in the future. I think.
Yeah, we'll be showing off some good stuff soon.
Lots of good time series and analysis.
I gotta get the motivation to get myself across the finish line on some of these models I'm working on and been thinking of. I keep going through. There's got to be a name for this in like manufacturing, where engineering maybe, where you could make it just slightly better, right? Like you come up with a new idea as opposed to just finally saying, nope, I'm going to make something that works, that I know works. Right. This whole deep learning endeavor, around every corner there's another shiny thing you can add. So at some point I just got to say, this is what I'm going to build.
Often hand those off to the Germans or the Japanese, right,
to make it better.
Precision engineering. Yeah. You're always making stuff better.
Hey Thomas, I do gotta say, man, I appreciate this comment. It's such a good event to be able to talk about MMT and for a few hours forget about all the necessary misery perpetuated on Earth. I'm glad you feel that way for the few hours we live stream each week here, because that's the space I like to live in as well. So I'm glad we can kind of build that here.
Someone's got to do it, right?
Fruitcake 298, haven't forgot about you yet. You'll be the last highlight of the night. So you've been read and highlighted. You've gotten you're a pick me girl. You've gotten your attention, and
there's a joke in there somewhere, but I'm getting a bit tired.
We've hit that point for the night. So
I did a bad thing yesterday. Like my new student who's scholarship physics, I did too much talking. So it's always bad when you do too much talking with a good student, right? They should be doing more of the work. But it was fun. It was fun to have a good student, and but it really did my voice in too. So I'm starting to scratch. I'm starting to feel my voice is getting croaky. So I might have to save up whatever else we got for next week.
Nice.
At least then.
I think we could wrap it up.
I do.
Oh no. Bijou has one more thought.
Well, you can wrap up. Go ahead.
No.
I could do a poem to finish if you want.
Okay. If you have one more thought, I'm good for another 6 minutes. Then I can't go to a fourth hour, but
no.
All right.
I'm good, man. I'm good.
Right.
Let the chat go and do better things. But it is fun to chat MMT. Thanks for you guys joining in. I really appreciate the chat comments.
Yeah. Good night. Doug, you do the outro. If Bijou's voice, I can't. Whatever.
It's only a short poem.
Yeah.
I got a short and a long poem.
Whatever.
A short one.
Whatever skill that is that Bijou has.
Do you want to?
I don't have.
Do you want to? Okay. So anyway,
go for it, man.
Great fun. See you next week. This is called the Debt Ceiling Lament. That's real quick. So don't blink. House Leader McCarthy went to a party. All the knobs were there. McCarthy said, "Who?" Warren Mosler said, "Boo." McCarthy to laundry for clean underwear.
I like it. All right, it's been another great week. Another great live stream. Everyone, thanks for hanging around.
Thanks, everyone.
Been a good one. We will see everyone.
See you guys later. Bye, fruitcake.
We'll see everyone next week.
I'm
Take care.
Cheat on you with my chocolate cake in a minute.
Take care, everyone. Till next time.
Take care. Bye.
Bye.